signed. Signed. Committee Room 29, 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 signed. Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon sitting of the Education Committee. So, usual housekeeping, which we'll just get through. We advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. And I would advise those in the public gallery they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that all devices are muted. You can connect to the Assembly Wi-Fi and there should be password details available there in the gallery rules. And just a reminder, it's not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meeting. So we'll get to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies. I don't have any apologies, so it looks like we've got full committee here today, so we can move on to item 2, Chairperson's business. So the first item on that would just be to extend a warm welcome to Colin Crawford, who is the new Ulster Unionist member on the Education Committee, replacing Robbie Butler. So you're very welcome today,
Thank you very
Colin.
much, Chair.
And I hope you do want to come back after this week's meeting, but you're very welcome today. Item 2.2 and under Chairperson's business is just the record the members will have of an informal briefing with the Northern Ireland nursery principals, with a cluster group of principals. And I would really just want to highlight in terms of that there were a number of issues raised, but I think the main issue that was raised in that briefing was around the funding of principal release. So nursery principals really feeling that was has been an issue that they've been raising for a number of years, but that there has been limited progress. And I think the key point they were drawing out was the disparity between some very small primary schools who would have funded release or would get a funding uplift through the small schools element of the common funding formula that nursery principals don't avail of. They highlighted the very, very disproportionate burden they carry in terms of SEN, as well as they have no specific SENCO support in a nursery setting. So they really did feel that there was a need for them to have that additional time. So I would like to propose that we write to the department. We ask for an update on any development of work around the funding of principal release. And I think particularly drawing reference to that disparity between resource that would go into a small school that could in many cases be smaller than the nursery. I think that was the key point that they were wanting to raise, and just whether that disparity is going to be addressed. And I would also suggest that given the issues that were raised around the common funding formula, it might be worth seeking an update from the department around where any planned review of the common funding formula sits, as that is something that is also raised consistently from various sectors. Are members agreed that we take that forward? Yep. Great. Okay. The only other item I want to raise at this stage, I would just declare an interest, and that I do have a child attending this particular school, and they were involved in the incident. But I think we were all just struck by the crash involving the school bus travelling from Transferor College during the week. And I know myself and other members did speak about that in the chamber this week. So it was really just to make a proposal that, given just that what a traumatic incident that was for everybody involved and for the wider school community, I would just suggest that the committee does write to the principal to send our best wishes to all those impacted, and I think to commend the school for its response. You know, they set up a critical incident centre, almost immediately, and staff were there, I know, to really very, very late in the day, assisting pupils and dealing with parent queries as well. I think we should also commend the pupils who were assisting their peers at the scene. I think they acquitted themselves very well and did their school proud. And I think, as well, as I know there is at least one individual still in hospital, that we would want to send our wishes for a speedy recovery to all those who were injured. So our committee agreed?
Yep.
Agreed. Okay. The other thing arising from that, and I think we obviously are aware there will be there'll be investigations into the incident, across all of the relevant statutory agencies. But I felt it might be timely to perhaps write to the EA just to ask if they are considering any sort of review of safety on school transport, including the EA's own fleet, school minibuses and those contracted out services to TransLink. It might be worth just putting that and right into the EA to see if that is something they'll be taking forward. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
That moves us on to item 3 in the agenda then, which is declarations of interest. Sorry, is there an item I've missed there? There was no briefing provided for that. We had the newcomer event, so I can reference that. We had the stakeholder event, where the committee engaged with a range of stakeholders who were involved in educational issues relating to newcomer communities in Northern Ireland. So I think it was a really helpful event, and I think there were a lot of actions that the committee would want to take away from that. Can I just confirm if a paper was tabled in relation to that on the packs? It was. Okay, my apologies if I have missed that in tabled papers. That's my oversight. So in terms of that, I mean, I'm happy to open it up to the committee at this stage if there are any actions arising on that. There potentially at forward work planning, I think there's an opportunity to look at whether one of the things was that the multicultural team at the EA, we felt it would be appropriate to bring them in front of committee, and we can certainly look at that. But I'm happy to open it up to the floor if there are any other proposals in terms of how we take that work forward. Nothing at this stage? No. We'll pick it up again at forward work planning as I think as a first action. The EA and that particular team, how resourced or otherwise they were, and some of the issues around the policy change. We already have correspondence in with them around some of these issues, so we can pick that up at that stage. Okay, so that moves us on to item 3, and that's declarations of interest. Can I check if any members of any interest they wish to declare in relation to any of the items on today's agenda?
Chair, can I just declare I am sit on the Board of Governors of the local primary school, just in case?
Yep, no problem. Sure, that can be noted. And obviously, if anything arises, as always in the meeting, that where an interest is identified, do just bring that to the clerk's attention. So item 4 then is matters arising, and I would refer members to the correspondence from the committee for the Executive Office and a copy of the draft programme for government, and that's at page 10. So the committee for the Executive Office, as we discussed briefly last week, is coordinating a response from the Assembly to the draft programme for government. We did consider it at our previous 2 meetings and agreed we would return to it today, hopefully for a final consideration around anything we would want to include in a committee response. I'm content from my perspective that I had set out anything that I would like the committee to cover in that response at our last meeting. But I know the Deputy Chair, you had asked for this to be brought back, so look, I'm happy really to open it out to members at this stage.
There's nothing really that I want to add to the response. Thanks.
Okay. Can I just check then before we agree, we have a note from previous meeting of the issues that were highlighted?
Yeah, we can listen back. We haven't finalised that because we were just checking whether anyone wanted to answer.
That's great. Well, I'm not seeing any other indications, so I think we'll maybe just bring that then to our next committee meeting for maybe a draft response then from the committee, if that could be tabled for next week. So our members agreed that we dispose of that item? Mm-hmm. Agreed. Okay, so that moves us on to item 5, and that is the draft minutes. So I'd refer members to the draft minutes of our previous committee meeting, and that's at page 101 of tabled papers. Of your packs. Can I propose that that's a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Is that agreed?
Agreed. Could I say that when I was speaking last week, I said Forrest na Gilligan had been asking for a meeting with the Minister from February. It should have been Conran na Gilligan. So, just to correct that.
Can that be corrected then in the note? And then I assume I'll sign that final copy next when it's available.
If it's not on the back page, you can sign the back page.
Okay, that's right. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Okay. So we're through the initial business quickly there, so hopefully that will give us time now to focus on the briefings that we have today. So and if Jim, you want to bring through the witnesses for item 6. So this is continuing the committee inquiry into relationships and sexuality education. We're going to have a briefing from the NSPCC today. And there's a briefing note there for members from the clerk at page 108 and a briefing paper from the NSPCC at page 109. So while the witnesses are coming in, I'll just let them get seated and comfortable, and then we can make a start. sure the representatives from NSPCC may want to do their own introductions, but I can just to get us started. You're all very welcome here today, and thank you for coming to bring evidence to the committee for our inquiry. With us today we have Dervla Sloan, Senior Policy and Public Affairs Officer with NSPCC. We have Karen Walker, the School Service Manager with NSPCC, and Caroline Cunningham, Policy and Public Affairs Manager for the NSPCC. So you are very welcome here today. Purpose of the oral briefing today is really to bring your perspective and your experience around provision of RSE and your views on any of the terms of reference that the committee has set out for our inquiry. So at this stage I'll be handing over to you. I would say up to 10 minutes for a presentation. I say it every week, definitely not a target, so if you come in under 10 minutes that is always helpful. We have your briefing paper, but please feel free to set out anything in the next few minutes that you want to particularly put on the committee's radar, and then we'll move to question and answer, and we generally look at 5 minutes per inquiry from each member. So if I could just ask everyone to try and work with me on those time scales, and also in terms of just the responses from NSPCC, to try and make sure we're getting straight to the answers on the questions, and if each question can be maybe dealt with by one particular witness, it helps us get through the agenda to make sure every member can get their inquiry dealt with as thoroughly as possible. So that's all from me at this stage. Happy to hand over to yourselves for a presentation.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation to come here today to brief the committee. My name is Caroline Cunningham. I'm the Policy and Public Affairs Manager for the NSPCC in Northern Ireland, and I'm going to give a short overview of the NSPCC's policy lines and positions in relation to RSE, and then my colleague Karen, who's School Service Manager for Northern Ireland, is going to talk about our school service offer and local campaigns work. And Dervla, Senior Policy and Public Affairs Officer, myself and Karen will do our best then to try and answer questions. So the NSPCC's overarching objective is to ensure that children and young people are protected from abuse and violence through early intervention and prevention, comprehensively tackling all forms of abuse that children face. The NSPCC supports compulsory, high-quality, inclusive relationships and sexuality education. We welcome the introduction of the regulations last year and the contribution that we hope the new requirements will make towards the delivery of RSE at key stages 3 and 4. The NSPCC believes that learning about healthy relationships is a core entitlement that all children should receive. Educative programmes present an opportunity to make sure that all young people know that they have a right to be treated and the responsibility to treat others with dignity and respect. We support inclusive RSE that is age and developmentally appropriate for all children in primary and post-primary schools. International research shows that RSE programmes can improve children's understanding of what constitutes a healthy or unhealthy relationship, help them to recognise abuse or inappropriate behaviour, and learn about their right to be kept safe and healthy. The research also shows that inclusive, comprehensive RSE can increase the likelihood of children coming forward to disclose experience of abuse. Disclosure of abuse, especially at the time of abuse, is rarely a straightforward process of a child simply saying that they have been abused. And there are several different ways that a child might try to let someone know what's happening to them. In 2013, the NSPCC published a research report entitled "No One Noticed, No One Heard." This described the childhood experiences of abuse of young men and young women who disclosed and sought help. On average, it took 7.8 years for young people who took part in the research to disclose sexual abuse. The younger the child was when the sexual abuse started, the longer it took to disclose. Disclosing abuse can be difficult for young people due to a range of barriers, including having no trusted person to talk to, feelings of isolation, fears, anxieties, manipulation by the perpetrator, experiencing no one listening, and a lack of recognition of the abuse by others. The NSPCC's research found that young people's ability to disclose was hindered by them not recognising what was happening to them was abuse, or not having the vocabulary to describe what was happening to them. Looking at the stats for Northern Ireland, and while also cautioning that the statistics don't represent the complete picture, PSNI recorded crime figures for 2022 to 2023 show that, on average, over 6 sexual crimes were committed against a child in Northern Ireland every day. 55% of all reported sexual offences were against children under 18, and recorded sexual offences committed against under 18s have more than doubled between 2012 and 2023. At the NSPCC, we've been campaigning for years for high quality RSE, and we know that engaging young people and understanding how they learn about these topics is a key part of this. In 2022, we carried out a UK survey which included almost 300 14 to 17-year-olds in Northern Ireland. In the survey, 61% of young people in Northern Ireland strongly agreed that they would like a say in what they learn about relationships, sex and sexuality, and 63% said they want a say in how they learn about it. Survey respondents from Northern Ireland were more likely than their counterparts in the rest of the UK to say that school never or rarely covers what they want to know about RSE. Whilst there has long been a statutory curriculum for RSE in Northern Ireland, apart from the minimum requirements, schools have been able to choose what elements of the RSE curriculum they want to teach. The existing evidence has shown that non-statutory provision has resulted in a wide variation in the quality and quantity of RSE provision. ETI's 2023 thematic evaluation of the preventative curriculum in schools and EOTA centres is clear that the flexible and non-statutory approach to the preventative curriculum has resulted in a situation where, and I quote, too many schools or centres can avoid completely or cover with insufficient depth and progression many of the more sensitive aspects of the preventative curriculum. The NSPCC is clear in our position that teachers and schools must be fully supported to deliver RSE, and also that engagement with parents and carers on the RSE curriculum is vital for developing a whole school approach for building good communication, transparency, confidence and trust in the teaching of RSE. So that concludes the policy element of our statement. I'm now going to pass to Karen, who's going to give an overview of the school service offer and local campaigns work within the area of RSE.
Thank you, Caroline. The NSPCC Speak Out Stay Safe programme is a safeguarding programme for children aged 4 to 11. It's called Speak Out Stay Safe. Some of you might have heard of it. We've been delivering this programme in primary schools in Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK from 2011. It helps children to understand abuse in all its forms, how to recognise the signs of abuse, that abuse is never a child's fault and they have the right to be safe, where to get help and the sources of help available to them, including our wonderful Childline service. This programme is delivered and has been delivered at no cost to schools, to pupils in their school setting, mostly by their teachers, through recorded assemblies, lesson plans, activities and display material that we create and we provide at NSPCC. To help embed the learning, we have additional workshops for children aged 6 to 7 and 9 to 11 provided by our fully trained volunteers. I'm delighted to share with you that this programme is very well received and very well respected in Northern Ireland. We've delivered Speak Out Stay Safe in 94% of primary schools here, and you'll know there's a lot of schools. We're working hard post-COVID to make sure that every child hears our messages at least once when they're younger and again when they're older. We've 2 programmes, one for the junior school and one for the senior school in primary. Speak Out Stay Safe is also available in an adapted version for children in special schools, and we've most recently rolled out a pilot for EOTAs as well. A significant evaluation took place a few years ago and it confirmed that our programme is making a big difference to children, as confirmed by Richard Hewitt from Strandtown Primary School, who said, "Well done NSPCC for taking an exceedingly difficult subject and bringing it to the child's level. It's vital that this message isn't lost, and for our children it really hit home." And from Mitchell House Special School, our pupils have really benefited. It's an engaging and easy to understand programme for our pupils with special educational needs. The resources and lesson plans are fantastic and allow for flexibility to make it bespoke for a particular group of pupils. We would highly recommend this programme to other schools. The messages are vital. So thinking about PANTS also, this is for schools who want to do more in-depth work with pupils and parents around sexual abuse. You've probably heard of PANTS. We deliver the NSPCC's Talk PANTS programme. This is for children aged 3 to 11. Which is aimed at helping young children stay safe from sexual abuse. Our free Talk PANTS resources are available on the NSPCC website to help children learn the Talk PANTS message, ensuring they grow up and understand that their body belongs to them. That's a key message. And it also teaches them how and who to speak out to if they ever need support. For this programme, we've freely available lesson plans, slide presentations, classroom activities, guidance to help schools and nurseries deliver talk pens to their settings. We have a range of bespoke materials also for children's special educational needs and in Makaton, which is wonderful, as well as providing parents resources. There are 2 key primary programmes. We have another programme called Talk Relationships. You may not have heard of Talk Relationships. It's a new programme thinking about older children. The NSPCC's Talk Relationships programme, our newest universal programme for post-primary age children, aged 11 to 16. This, as I say, it's relatively new and we're just starting to plan how we're going to roll this out across Northern Ireland. It supports schools to take a whole school approach to build capacity among school leaders and teachers to more confidently, and that's a key word, deliver healthy relationships education. We provide everything schools need to help them bring in a whole school approach to their RSE provision. This includes the evidence base, an implementation guide, step-by-step advice, a whole school approach framework. We've lots of practical tools teachers can use as well, including benchmark and examples, self-assessment tools, and also editable action plans for them to think about what are they going to do next to improve their RSE provision. With Talk Relationships, there's also 2 e-learning courses for teachers, 12 modules for school teachers and school leaders to help them build their confidence in delivering RSE education and respond to abusive behaviours. Schools in Northern Ireland were involved in the filming of this, which is wonderful, and we piloted some elements of Talk Relationships across 12 post-primary schools in Northern Ireland in 2022. To support teachers' learning, we also support them with summary documents and key messages that are based on evidence around the various, sometimes difficult and sensitive subject areas, such as online relationships, hurtful behaviour, sexual harassment, consent, sharing nudes, and unhealthy relationships. This helps teachers build their confidence in what they're delivering. Again, created by experts and based on evidence, which is really important. As part of each lesson, there's signposting for children and young people to get further help. And not forgetting parents, a key component in the whole school approach. We support teachers with common questions that parents might ask and how to respond. Bringing parents along in this journey is really important. I'm sure we'll all agree. So that draws our opening statement to a close. I'm not sure, I think we were around 10 minutes. And I'm going to pass back to the chair for any questions members have for any of us. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. I suppose my first question, I want to focus at the primary end, because I think we've had a lot of discussion that probably is much more focused so far around post-primary education and very much around young people and their engagement with these issues. So I think it's been really helpful actually to get a really clear focus on what RSE might look like and what the needs of children at that end of the education system might be. You've been very clear on how important it is that children at that younger end, at the primary and indeed even in preschool, are getting good education around healthy relationships, around safe adults, around bodily autonomy, all of that stuff. So given that focus that you've highlighted, and I should just point out, and I had the opportunity to attend a Talk Pants event, I think earlier in the year, and got to meet Pantosaurus, which is one of the highlights of my career, I would say, so far. I think I was the only elected rep there, so I was in every photo with Pantosaurus, which I hadn't quite banked on when I went to that one. But given that focus on the healthy relationship aspect of this at the primary end, in terms of the PDMU and the current minimum content that is set for primary schools, I mean, how effective do you think that the minimum content is ensuring those key areas are covered for primary school children at the moment? Clearly, your programs are trying to ensure that stuff is covered, but in terms of minimum content, how effective would you say that is?
I suppose in terms of what we said in our opening statement, I said we look, I suppose, what children and young people have said. Now, I suppose in our research, which is our own survey, which is 14 to 17-year-olds, but it's reflected in other research backed up by others and other with young people. I suppose children have said that, you know, they don't believe that they have got, I suppose, the RSE that they need in so many circumstances. And it's about, I suppose, you know, for us, our interest is in RSE as a tool for safeguarding. you know, and it's not for the NSPCC to stipulate what should be in the curriculum, but what needs to be in is enough there to keep children safe from harm. And as I say, you only have to look at the statistics around disclosure, around abuse, and that's what we need to keep on coming back to. Are we doing enough to keep children and young people safe?
And those statistics that you outlined would give anybody pause for thought, and I think it just highlights how critical it is that safeguarding is at the heart of this. It was encouraging to see that 94% I think of schools in Northern Ireland have engaged with that Speak Out Stay Safe programme, which is really encouraging. That means there's 6% that haven't. Do we understand why?
So there's only 10 mainstream schools we've never delivered in, and we're doing everything we can to get into those schools. There's around 50 special educational needs schools, and we're working hard to get into all of those. We've only recently, probably in the last 2 years, launched our special educational needs programme, so we're just starting to roll out it. So if I come back to you in 2 years, I imagine that that's going to be improved. We've also got some independent Christian schools on our lists. I'm not sure whether any of you are aware of those, but we have limited engagement with those schools. But our focus at the minute is on those special educational needs schools, EOTIS, and those 10 schools that we've never been in. That's our key priority.
Well, look, certainly 94% is very encouraging. Do you think, in terms of any recommendations that NSPCC would make, that is there more that the department could do to ensure that every child leaving primary school has got a good grounding in the education they need to keep them safe?
We've, I think it's fair to say, engaged a number of times with the department over the past year, and obviously we've got a longer term relationship with the Department of Education. For us, I suppose, and I think for us, I suppose it's. We tried to work with not just the curriculum team where RSE sits, but this isn't just about the curriculum team, this is about safeguarding, it's about safeguarding of people's well-being, and I think they have recognised this, and I think so that's been very helpful for us to see that across the two different directorates. And I think we've been asked for another meeting which we need to respond to and get a date for. Again, I suppose that, again, to bring it back to, I suppose, government responsibilities. For us, we're very clear. This is a Department of Education led, but this is now in the End of Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, which is an executive strategy, and it's up to the executive as a whole. Healthy relationships is in that TEO strategy. It's in the domestic and sexual abuse strategy, which is jointly led by Justice and Health, but I think also Education's in there, communities in there. You know, prevention of abuse, I suppose, for us, of course, we're going to be advocating that this needs to be a priority, but yes, the Department of Education leading it, but the responsibility, I suppose, across, from a public health perspective, across all of us.
Right. Just one final question, and you did reference the need for good parental engagement to make, for your programmes to work, that parental engagement is key. To what extent is that essential in your view for especially at primary school end, to ensure that parents are equipped to continue those conversations at home, to ensure that this is not a taboo subject in any household, that children feel, that they can bring these conversations back to the family environment, but that parents are equipped? So is there a need in your view for resources to be provided to schools to help them with that parental engagement aspect of this?
Yeah, I think we could do more there, definitely. We do a lot of work with the school to prep the school leadership and the teachers. We have our website and we provide content for parents. We have a teacher's letter that goes out. Our parents' letter that goes out. There's a big section on the NSPCC website to support parents in being consistent with our messages. One of the barriers, I suppose, is getting that to the parent. That's an issue, but that's not just us. That's right across education. So there is more that can be done, and we're always thinking about how we can better support parents through Speak Out, Stay Safe, and provide more information for them to bolster. I mean, one of the great things about Speak Out, Stay Safe is that kids go home with our key messages. They go home with the Buddy Kit. Some of you have probably seen Buddy. That's our character. Buddy's a speech bubble, all about speaking out. So when children go home from school, they go home with our key messages, with their wee finger flexor, with their safe adults that they've thought about in school. And that is what we hope will prompt conversations to be able to extend those messages within the home.
That's great. Look, and I hope in terms of the report that comes out of the committee that there will be a focus around what can the department and the EA do to better support schools to positively engage parents with RSE. I think there's a lot of negative discussion around the parental aspect of this, and it's actually about that positive engagement that actually enhances what the child is learning in the classroom. But that's all from me. Deputy Chair, are you looking to come in?
Yeah, just a couple short questions. First of all, could you tell us how extensive your engagement has been with the Department of Education or the Minister?
We've met with the department a number of times over the last year. I'm not sure how many, and as I say, they've just contacted us and it's sitting on us to get back and arrange a further meeting. We haven't met formally with the Education Minister, but again, we haven't sought a formal meeting until actually recently. We spoke to him in a non-Education Minister setting, and he has agreed to meet with us, so it's now up to us to take that forward. But I think it's evolving, it's continuing to evolve. I suppose where we come from, we see ourselves as experts in safeguarding, and it's what we can do to assist the department in terms of the work with schools and with individual teachers who are the experts at working with children.
Okay, thanks for that. And you also said in your opening presentation, Caroline, that there's a wide variation of the quality and quantity of RSE being taught in schools. Is that dependent on the type and ethos of the schools, in your opinion?
I don't have the research to hand. I think that's from the ETI, the Inspectorate's report. What I would say is, I suppose, all schools, regardless of ethos, as far as we're concerned, as far as we know, will regardless of the faith or the ethos, will be keeping the child and their safety at the centre of things. So for us, faith or ethos or whatever we want to call it shouldn't be the issue. It's about looking generally at ourselves and our responsibility in safeguarding children. So in terms of that individual research, we'd have to come back on that ETI report because that's what it was lifted on. But I suppose for us, again, it's just bringing this back each time to safeguarding children, and regardless of ethos, regardless of faith, we all have that responsibility to safeguard children.
Yeah, and if I can, just come in on that. When we started to deliver Speak Out, Stay Safe 11 years ago, more than that, 12, 13 years ago, we talked to older children about sexual abuse, and that was a barrier to some schools because we have a slide on it, we give children what the signs of it are. It's a small part of the programme, but it's a significant part of teaching children about abuse. And we worked really hard with all the schools to overcome the barriers around talking to children about sexual abuse. And now that is no longer a barrier, and we've done that work. So it is just about working in partnership with schools to hear their concerns and work with them to overcome the barriers.
Well, why did the schools have that difficulty? Surely it's, and it's an important societal issue, child sexual abuse. One would think schools would welcome the opportunity for experts in safeguarding like yourselves to come in and talk to children about that.
I think as well, we often hear a lot about confidence of schools and confidence of teachers and support for teachers, support for schools. And I mean, we are in a position where NSPCC has put together a lot of that resource. And as Karen says, it's an absolute, credit to the schools and our work of our schools team that we are now 94% of primary schools, and we're now at the start of that journey with the post-primary. I suppose that's what we say to the department and others. We're there to help support because, as I say, safeguarding is at the centre of what we do. I think for it has been to date for us. It has been those younger key stages which we have worked with, and it is now just we're at this journey now with post-primary. Let's help and what we can do to help support with that and help, I suppose, give our safeguarding expertise to the department to insist that this becomes a reality and things change. Because I suppose it's also the risks to children are ever changing, the types of abuse, and that's why we need to keep current on this. We need to keep on evolving. Yeah.
Sure. And just finally, in terms of the 6% of schools that you haven't yet been able to access, is there resistance from those schools to you coming in to deliver your program?
You know what? With it's the 10 schools really that are in the mainstream. The other schools we're still approaching them, but it's the 10 we've been trying to work with now for a long time. Now, bear in mind, it was at maybe 80 schools about 4 years ago. We've got it down through our work with these schools to just this 10. One of our issues is sometimes getting through to the school and getting to speak to the safeguarding lead or the principal, and that's been the barrier for us. So we haven't been able to hear from them what their concerns are. We can only make assumptions.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Michelle, you had indicated next.
Thanks very much for your time today. I really appreciate the briefing. I thought it was excellent. I think you kind of struck on what was, I guess, one of the key points here around having children being able to form and maintain healthy relationships, and then spot when there's unhealthy relationships and veering into like abusive relationships. So based on that, and you've also commented on the ETI report and the fact that children are reporting that they're not getting perhaps the information that they feel they should or want. How do you feel then about the potential or parental or carers opt-out in the context of RSE?
I think we've been clear, I suppose, in our statement and in the paper also that we don't support an opt-out. NSPCC is an organisation. I suppose for us it's about having everyone getting the same messages on RSE, you know, those same safeguarding messages. And it's about, I suppose, inclusivity and equity, and where do you draw the line, you know? And I think as we know already, the research out there, which we commented again in our open statement, that there is, you know, some of those more sensitive subjects which haven't, you know, which there are concerns, and ETI as mentioned, we talked about that report quite a bit. You know, where do you draw the line? And for us, you know, no opt-out removes that ambiguity of what can be covered.
And just sort of following on from that slightly then, in terms of the contribution of children and young people to creating resources around RSE, what kind of role do you think that they ought to play? Again, having fed in that they don't think they're getting the information necessarily that they ought to, what role should they play in making sure that the materials that are used, you know, meet their needs?
Yeah. Thinking about the whole school approach framework that we're soon to start promoting to schools in Northern Ireland, that's a key component of it, where the school actually engage with children and young people and parents in developing their RSE provision. So that's really important. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Donnie, you're next.
Sorry, Pat actually got my question. I was going to ask about the schools and what the reasons for and the challenges, so sorry.
You're all good. No, that's fine by me. Peter, over to you.
That's great, thank you, Chair. It's not every time I'll start by saying this, but I just want to say thank you to the NSPCC for the work that you do in safeguarding children. And I want to, you know, be just very open about that. You're probably waiting for a but there's no but coming. The work that you do is so important in Northern Ireland, keeping children safe. I know lots about PANTS. I have 3 kids ranging from 8 to 13, and they're all more than aware of some of the things that you've talked about today, because of the work you've done in schools, you know, and I think that's just really core. I have just two small questions, and actually your written evidence is really, really good. I'm going to read out a sentence to you. A commonly agreed core RSE curriculum where all children in Northern Ireland can access is a crucial step towards ensuring young people are better equipped to understand what constitutes healthy and unhealthy relationships, both online and offline. And I put a comma after that and said, and be safe at all times. Maybe that's my addendum to it. That's nearly a mission statement, perhaps, for this committee. And I suppose where we, and this is really my first question to you, where we maybe start to struggle is that the committee would agree to more or less everything you've said so far. If it was up to me, I would say safeguarding is the priority issue in Northern Ireland, and you could add on to things like that, consent, stuff around women and girls, male misogyny, the sharing of images, all that stuff. Where you'll find disparity in the committee is where you push further than that. And that's probably where, you know, I would probably then say, in terms of looking at a mandatory curriculum, that's where we maybe run into more difficulties, because we want to sign up to all of this, because this is so core and so key, because this is about keeping our children safe. I mean, do you think there's, in terms of what NSPCC would like to prioritise in terms of this RSE inquiry, what are the key things that you think should be in a new mandatory curriculum? If you had to pick 3 or 5, what are those key 3 or 5?
I suppose for us, I mean, the message we want, and I keep on repeating this, but our core message in all of this would be to not get distracted, you know, onto individual things. The core issue is about safeguarding children, and for us the message would be RSE is absolutely critical for safeguarding children and young people. I don't know if it would be helpful even to say some of the areas that we cover, you know, and that might
be in talk relationships.
Yeah.
In talk relationships. Yeah, I've got this with it. So it actually starts off at age 10. So it's a post-primary programme, but there's a module that can be done for younger children. So it starts off around feelings, young people expressing feelings about starting secondary school. Bear in mind, it's focused on our programmes are healthy relationships. Talk Relationships is about relationships. How to express feelings, how to manage transition, find and reliable information. That's so important. And that's probably when you start to think about the components and what's critical. That's really critical for children and young people to get the right information, factual, evidence-based information, not just to be doing Google searches because nobody's told them, nobody's taught them. And then before you know it, they're not going down the right road. So the programme then develops. As they get older, it builds into changing friendships, communicating safely, positively online. Then you're getting into hurtful behaviour. When a child then reaches 10, it's all about personal relationships, developing strategies for recognising unwanted, risky, harmful behaviour. Then you're getting into looking at stereotyping, image sharing, harmful sexual behaviours, online relationships, the meaning of consent. So that's up at age 14. And then as you go into age 15, 16, it changes again and it advances again in age into relationships, rights, values, expectations, boundaries, the impact of unhealthy relationships and abuse, and also the impact of online pornography. But what's really important in the whole Talk Relationships programme is that the school create a whole school approach around it. So we're not asking them to take this from the beginning and run it right through to the end. We're asking them to work in consultation with their school culture, their school ethos, and to create a programme that works for them.
That's amazing, and thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Karen, I have one more quick question. Just on page 7 of your evidence, and it's really around the self-generated images and sexual messages, and there's a paragraph there. I'll let you flick through to it. It was really interesting and highly disturbing at the same time. I'd have to just reflect that. What are the challenges around that for the NSPCC at the moment?
I suppose online safety is a core priority for NSPCC in terms of addressing those challenges, and it's a strategic priority for the NSPCC at the moment. I mean, we campaigned for many years as an organisation to get the Online Safety Act, and we got it passed just over a year ago now. And for us now, it's about, I suppose, working with Ofcom and challenging Ofcom around implementation. And making sure the big tech companies are held to account in terms of that duty that they have to safeguard children. I think that's the thing about the online world. It's ever changing, and there's ever new risks. And so it's also, I don't want to be completely, pessimistic about it, because there's so many benefits of the online. We have to be very careful as an organisation. So many benefits of the online world. It is a part of children and young people's daily lives, and it's, it's about us and as a society, ensuring that we work with that and ensuring that we can respond and support and I suppose, keep on responding to those risks and evolve. And I say, for a big part of it is there's a big role for Ofcom and for the tech companies, and it is something that we continue to work on. And it's like we've already talked about. It's, the support that we can give to parents and carers in terms of kind of, what information we can give around kind of having those regular conversations with their children, keeping, doors open, keeping, very good communication, so that if and when something does happen down the line, your child will speak out. And that's always, this is what RSE is about, the children knowing what abuse is, feeling that they can speak out. So.
I really feel like saying amen at the end of that. That was so good. Sorry, Chair, away you go.
On that note, Cara, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies, thank you so much. I just think it's remarkable what the NSPCC do with regarding our children and keeping them safe. And I think ultimately knowledge is power for young people, and I think it's heartbreaking. One of you had mentioned that they didn't have the vocabulary to share, things to do with abuse. Just with regards, I have 3 questions, so I'll do them all at once and then give you the chance to respond. Just with regards to the emerging tech, evolving tech AI, we've seen how horrific it has been and used and weaponised towards women. So I have no doubt, sadly, that this technology will likely do the same with children. Just what conversations are you having on that? I know you referred to Ofcom and tech companies. My next question is just around homeschooling. I note over the past few years, particularly in the north, there has been an increase in homeschooling. Do you have any particular concerns that children who are homeschooled are less likely to be around other adults, other children, and maybe are less likely to have that crucial information that they would get would they have been in school? Is that something you've come across? And then lastly, just on the wider issue then of paedophilia, I suppose, does the Department of Justice liaise with yourselves just on childhood sexual abuse, or any conversations around tougher legislation or harsher sentences? Any information you can provide would be really helpful.
I suppose if I start with the online one, and then finish up with the homeschool, and then we can come back on the justice issue. And play, if we forget anything, if you know.
No worries. No, you're grand.
I suppose, again, I said already, I suppose the scale of abuse that children continue to face online, I say, often as young women, is unacceptable. And for us, I suppose, often it is about those tech companies and holding them to account. Yeah. Many of them have rolled out apps and features without children's safety in mind, and meaning that children are continuing to face the risk of abuse and exploitation, and there's continuously dangerous and inappropriate material, and there's algorithms, everything we can talk about, heard it on the radio, talked about today on Radio Ulster. We're very clear that those risks are preventable, and it is just about tech companies stepping up and putting children's safeguarding within the design of their platforms. Most social media platforms, for example, they've designed platforms for children aged 13 and over, but tech companies have continuously failed to, put in appropriate safeguarding mechanisms to stop that happening. Adult perpetrators are continuing to use online world. Tech companies haven't done enough to prevent that. It is really, we continuously call for, robust implementation of the Online Safety Act, and a lot of that is on Ofcom, and for us, and we're working with Ofcom, our colleagues centrally in London, to continue to challenge that and continue to, do what we can to support. But it's ongoing. It's not going to go away, and we will continue to push as an organisation, and we're very happy at another stage because it is a key priority of work with us to talk in further depth. Can you go over yourself to homeschooling?
Yeah, and the homeschooling one, that's really interesting and one we think about a lot. In terms of Speak Out, Stay Safe, our aim is to reach every child irrespective of where they're educated. So this includes children who are educated at home. So when we look at the fact that we've been in nearly every mainstream programme or mainstream school, we're now working our way through special educational needs, EODIS, I've said that. Something we're really thinking about now is children who are educated at home. So we have a programme of work within NSPCC that's called the REACH programme, and it's just about reaching all those sectors that haven't yet engaged, including elective home education. So it's currently a big priority of ours. And what we do want to do is to better engage with those parents who are educating their children at home so that they can deliver the message and deliver them consistently, like they're being delivered to children who are in mainstream school. So it is something we're thinking about, and it's a really important question.
Thank you.
The third part of the question, sorry, you wouldn't mind repeating that?
It was just with regards, I suppose, we've seen time and time again how people are brave, come forward, tell their stories, and then we often see these perpetrators of childhood sexual abuse get really lenient sentences. So I'm just wondering, is it something you've done any campaigning around, advocacy for, and does the Department of Justice reach out to yourselves and engage with yourselves on these matters, just around harsher sentences or improved legislation?
It is something we are looking at internally in terms of, sentencing, and in light of the Online Safety Act, is something we don't have all the answers yet, but it's something that we know that we have to look at, because the Online Safety Act has brought a lot of things now that need to be given consideration. We do have a good, working relationship with the Department of Justice. You're probably familiar with NSPCC runs the Young Witness Service, which is majority funded by the Department of Justice. It's the advocacy service for children who have to give evidence in criminal court. And we do see day in out, the impact of abuse. We've also just seen the domestic and sexual abuse strategy launched and published. NSPCC hosted that launch in our premises, so I suppose that was a good indicator for us that children are being recognised as a significant victim in Northern Ireland. As we've already said about the stats, in terms of 55% of sexual offence stats are children and young people. So it's for us now looking at implementation of that strategy, looking again what action is taken and how we can continue to push for, greater work to try and, there's obviously supporting children and young people after, and the criminal side of things. Prevention for us, and bringing it back to RSE, prevention for us is in the name of our organisation is prevention. So it's that's always our, I suppose, drive, you know.
Yeah, it's a powerful preventative against education, certainly, and 94% is really impressive. So thank you all very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Cara. So David, you had indicated next.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. And I would echo colleagues in saying that the initiatives that NSPCC run are excellent, and I've heard nothing but positive feedback from people I've talked to about their role within our schools. I think it goes back to something I mentioned to the Chair after the meeting finished last week about the issue of RSE. Quite often results in a lot of us with varying concerns about different things talking past each other, because there are, as you referred to, some of those more divisive subjects. But actually, it is my belief that on 80-90% of what we're talking about, most people are agreed, and I think that's reflected in how people think of your programs. Mm-hmm. Could I just ask then? We heard you referred to the 40% of children who say school never, and 27 who say school rarely covers the aspect or RSE appropriately for them. Could I just ask? We heard evidence last week from the Catholic Schools Trustee Service that they felt that sometimes the way in which questions are placed to pupils can, as with everybody else, shape their response. And they felt that quite often when you asked specifically, have you learned about this in school or that in school with specific issues, that actually their response is higher than if you ask just about RSE in general. Is that a view that you would share, or would be reflected that actually if you talk to them about specific issues, as you no doubt do, that they will recognise that actually teachers and so on have perhaps had some of those conversations?
I suppose we're not able, to comment on individual methodologies used in pieces of research. I suppose all we can do is, talk about what we're aware of, and I suppose our survey we mentioned. What I would say, is the results of our survey, similar findings are in other pieces of research, like the Belfast Youth Forum's piece of work. I think Relate NI have done pieces of work, but in terms of kind of across the board, I suppose we wouldn't have all the information in front of us. We also have a very robust evaluation of talk relationships that we could share in terms of what children and young people have said.
In 2022 we did an evaluation of the talk relationships pilot, and we did surveys with children and young people. There's a lot of data and detail there that you might be interested in, so certainly we can share that.
That'd be useful. That's great.
It'll probably help you to answer that question.
I'm sure
it'll give you more in-depth information.
Then could I also ask then, we talked about the opt-out and you've made clear your position on that. In your experience, have you had experience of parents opting pupils out of your programs? And if so, I'd be interested to know, is it because of, we talked about the flexibility of an opt-out last week as well, have they opted out to your specific element, or is it a general opt-out which means that they are withdrawn from all RSE type lessons, and therefore it may be reflected that actually they have a concern about another element of the programme but are being withdrawn from other elements which are less likely to bring that opt-out? Yeah,
I suppose we can't comment on individual cases in terms of an individual, I suppose.
No, just in general, are you aware of?
But in terms of our own programmes,
I can answer this from Speak Out Stay Safe perspective, because that's the programme we've got most experience delivering, and obviously we've talked a lot. Education's really fundamental, and it's really important that every child hears these messages. We do a lot of work with the school in the lead up to give them information on what's going to be delivered. We have a parent letter that goes out to parents prior to Speak Out Stay Safe that tells them what's going to be delivered, when it's going to be delivered, how it's going to be delivered, who's delivering it, all of that. They can be referred to the NSPCC website for more information. We have on that letter an opportunity for the parents to come in and talk to teachers if they have any questions about the programme, and we then provide support for those teachers. It's very rare that we do get children being opted out of Speak Out Stay Safe. Obviously you could have cases where our content could be triggering for a young person, maybe a young person who's just recently gone into care. For a whole lot of reasons it could be triggering for them. And what we do is work with the school on a case-by-case basis to think about how we can better support that young person to stay part of the programme. But ultimately, you know, it is up to the child if they raise any issues, whether they want to be part of it. But it's very, very, very rare that a child actually opts out of our programme, or parents opt their children out of programme.
And that's what I would have thought.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to have that answer,
Yeah.
because I would have shared as well from Pat's question the concern that if schools were concerned about the learning we had around child abuse and so on, and weren't comfortable with that. I think it is important that we interrogate the reasons why, so that if there are certain elements or they're worried about things being triggering and so on, then we can understand what exactly it is. Because I suspect there's very few schools. I would like to think there's no schools that would actually object to, you know, trying to safeguard children against child abuse.
Yeah.
It's understanding if there's certain elements, and you've given an example there of triggering, why there might be a reason why someone might not want a particular child or class to be hearing some of what you might have to share.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think. Yeah, thank you very much for your answers, and I think it is just important that we do that, drilling down a bit to make sure that we're getting the nuance of why people object and what exactly it is they object to, or why they may want to opt out or want that flexibility. Thank you.
David, yeah, definitely a bit of a theme. I think that need to, if people are opting out, it's the interrogation of why, and supporting schools to not just say, well, that's that matter closed, then you've opted out. I think that need to provide that support for schools, and I think even at the stage of developing resources, developing policies, that approach of ensuring that we're really fully engaged with parents, to me, feels really, really critical on this. Cathy, you'd indicated to come in.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for your presentation. I just want to follow up on something that Pat had raised earlier, and as an organisation that, you know, at its core is safeguarding, and you've made that very clear, and I think that's very widely known. Is it concerning for you that you're having difficulty in contacting safeguarding officers in those 10 schools that you mentioned, that you just, I think you said you just can't get into?
I suppose, again, it's getting back to, I suppose, it's a very small number of schools we're talking about, and there can be a range, but I don't want to...
Yeah, I mean, it could, you have a lot of teaching principals in schools, and schools are very, very busy places. As you know, so it could be that our information is just not getting through to the right person. So maybe you don't know this, but it's really hard to find out an email address for a principal of a school. So what you're going through is the info@ or the school@ email addresses. Now, we worked really, really hard. We've got 15 years of experience of working with schools, so we have a lot of contact details for a lot of schools. But it could be that our information isn't getting to those 10 schools. Maybe the secretary has the information, it's not getting through. We do phone, we do leave messages. It could be a case that for some of those schools, and I don't want to talk about specific examples, but we may have had a meeting with those schools to talk about the programme. They may have said, we'll come back with you for dates to book it in, and then we're now at the stage where we're not getting the date. So we're probably at all different stages with those 10 schools, but it's 10 mainstream schools where we haven't delivered our programme. But for us, I know we're focusing on that 10, but that's a massive celebration for us that it's got down to 10, and very, very soon that's going to be down to single numbers, which is really good. And for every skill that my team get on board, and we work very hard thinking about how to approach all these skills and getting them on board, including working with CPSS, and CPSS will send out our messages and our content for us. We'll work with lots of different stakeholder organisations. We go into newsletters, press. It's not just about phoning a school, contacting a school and send them an email. There's a lot of things we do, but every single school that we get on board is a celebration. I mean, it would be great if the department could send out a message to all the schools and just tell them to do our programme. That would be wonderful. But yeah, we're celebrating getting down to those last few schools.
That was actually a follow-up. That's what I wanted to ask you. What, if any, intervention do you think the department should make in that case? If it is a case that you're just not getting any, if it's not that information isn't being passed, it's just that the schools are maybe refusing to do it.
I think we don't want to detract from what the actual overall message is, that we've been into 94% of schools.
Which is a fantastic number, yeah.
And I know as well, we have to be clear as well, NSPCC is one provider. There are lots of providers of RSE, but we can only talk from our own perspective, and it is, and obviously Karen says, we're here promoting NSPCC, and we really believe we've a wonderful programme. And I suppose, again, to celebrate, we're in 94% of schools. We do continue to work with the department. I say we're meeting them hopefully soon again, and it's it's evolving. It's
yeah, and it's not just about Speak Out, Stay Safe, because yes, that's the one that I manage, so I'm going to talk very passionately about Speak Out, Stay Safe, but everything Caroline has talked about earlier, and talk relationships and pants, it's about it all. And it's about reaching schools with all of our programmes and all of our messages.
And for us, it's talk pants, it's Speak Out, Stay Safe, which is primary schools, talk relationships, but we also provide that wraparound with Childline, which is a universal service, which we should mention for all children and young people, and we also have our helpline as well. We have direct services too. So, we do like to think we have that wraparound support, and we work very hard, to reach communities.
Yeah. And do you think the department should be able to intervene?
I suppose again it would be up for the department to, in terms of what it wants. We can't speak for the department as well. Let's say.
Yeah. All we can do is promote what we do to them. And they've been great and very accepting. We've had maybe 3 meetings this year.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the Education Authority then and the youth work sector, do you have any engagement with those guys and the ability to go into Education Authority youth clubs and things like that?
Our programmes at the minute, no, we don't deliver them through youth clubs, but that's a really good question. But at the minute, we focus on reaching every child through their school.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, look, thank you all. Unless there's don't see any other indications, it's been a really, really helpful session today. So we really thank you for your briefing and for your time today. And I think there's a lot there that we will feed in, and I think that really strong safeguarding focus has been really, really helpful and positive today. So thank you for your time. And I think just to put formally on record from the committee, we all interact with schools who have used your programmes and are, I think we should pay tribute to that work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so while we just have a changeover of witnesses, are there any actions arising that you want to identify from Clark's perspective, or is there anything from any members of anything in particular other than just the evidence that we've gathered today?
I think the whole school approach emerged as a theme that the committee will probably want to follow through evidence sessions with subsequent witnesses. And David had a request for additional information, which the witnesses said they would come back about, so we'll follow up in writing for that one. Did anyone else have anything additional?
Don't think so.
I think it's just worth focusing on the point, because we did start to talk about those 6% schools, I think, that weren't receiving them, but the point I think were raising there, I think worth noting, is that they could be getting it from other providers, or they could be, it doesn't mean that there's not a similar approach. It's about drilling down and finding out, I guess.
We don't want to make assumptions on that, of course.
Yeah,
no, absolutely.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready to bring the next set of witnesses through if they are available. So this is item 7 on your agendas, and that will be a briefing from the Transferor Representatives Council. There's a briefing note from the committee clerk at page 122 and a briefing paper from the TRC in your tabled papers. So we just want to bring the witnesses through and let them get settled, and then we will make a start. Afternoon, everyone. Yes, take a seat, please. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So just while you get yourselves settled there, today from the TRC joining us, we're pleased to have Dr. Andrew Brown, the chair of the TRC from the Presbyterian Church in Ireland. We have Dr. Anita Gracie, Board of Education member from the Methodist Church in Ireland, and Dr. Rebecca Stevenson, representative of the Presbyterian Church in Ireland. So you're very welcome today at committee, and we thank you for taking the time to come to give evidence to our inquiry into RSE. So the approach with all other witnesses has been we're happy to open up for an initial presentation. We received your briefing paper, which was appreciated and gave us plenty of material to get started with. But up to 10 minutes to make any introductory remarks that you want in relation to the evidence you're presenting today, and then we'll move to question and answer from members. We try to stick as far as possible to 5 minutes per inquiry for each member. So So if I could ask members to work with me on that, and also from the witnesses' perspective, if there's maybe one member on the panel who's best placed to answer a question and take it, then that can help us get through the evidence session. But also, just if I do cut any inquiry short, if we are running out of time, please don't take that as any personal offence. We generally struggle to get through in the time we have, as members will have a lot of questions. But you are very welcome, so I will hand over to you for opening remarks and we will take it from there.
Sir, thank you very much, and thank you, committee, for inviting us to come and give evidence. We hope that it will be helpful and that we can put some light around your questions as to the views of TRC on this matter. So my name's Andy Brown. My day job is as a lecturer in education, and part of what I do in my own Christian faith and service is to be involved with faith and education. It's a huge passion of mine. I was for 8 years the chair of education for the Presbyterian Church. That took me on to the executive of the Transferor's Representative Council, and I'm now in my 3rd year of chairing that. To my left,
Anita Gracie, as said, also a lecturer in education and religious studies, and I'm the Secretary of Education for the Methodist Church in Ireland, as said, so therefore I'm their representative on the TRC, and yeah, this would be very much within my area of research and interest. So.
and to my right.
I'm Rebecca Stevenson. I work as the Public Affairs Officer for the Presbyterian Church, and I also am their Education Secretary, which also takes me onto the TRC.
So the TRC is an organisation, and I'm going to take you through some of the highlights in the paper rather than go through the paper itself. You've all been through that, and I'm sure you have many questions on it. So we represent the Church of Ireland, the Presbyterian Church, and the Methodist Church in Ireland in matters of education in Northern Ireland. We were established in 1943. We work closely with the Department of Education, and we hold statutory rights under the 86 Order, where we have a role of governance and controlled schools. We're also an organisation which lobbies on behalf of the interests of controlled schools, along with the Controlled Schools Support Council. So controlled schools, comprising 49% of all of the schools in Northern Ireland, they maintain a non-denominational Christian ethos, which Transferor governors help uphold. So we'd like to emphasise today our commitment to supporting excellent RSE in schools while respecting the needs of young people. We believe that RSE should be taught in a sensitive, inclusive manner, which reinforces other policies such as around bullying, safeguarding and pastoral care. We'd like to stress that RSE should not only provide biological and legal information, but also allow students to explore moral and ethical considerations such as those related to abortion and early pregnancy prevention. But a key concern for us is that no aspect of RSE can be taught in a morally neutral environment. We argue that RSE is inherently shaped by worldviews that involve moral and ethical judgments about relationships and sexuality. Therefore, the TRC believes that RSE must consider the whole person, physically, mentally, emotionally and spiritually, and should be taught in a way that respects the school's ethos. Lessons should be delivered within a safe environment where students can express their personal views without fear of repercussion. We support a flexible approach to the RSE curriculum, one which allows teachers to tailor content to meet the specific needs of their students. However, we do voice concern over the content mandated by the former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. That will be no surprise for you, because we felt it imposed certain directives on schools. We assert that RSE teaching should remain responsive to local community needs and should reflect the ethos of each school, particularly when addressing sensitive topics such as abortion and sexual activity. So every school is required to have a policy outlining its approach to RSE. This policy should be delivered and developed collaboratively by governors, parents, teachers and other stakeholders, and should reflect the school's moral and religious values. We stress the importance of parental consultation when creating or updating those policies, especially on sensitive issues. Policies should also consider trauma and mental health issues that may not be adequately addressed in existing guidelines. Schools should review and update their RSE policies regularly to reflect changes in society, especially concerning social media's impact on young people. We call for consultations when significant changes to RSE policies are proposed, ensuring that all members of the school community, including pupils, are involved in the decision-making process. We acknowledge the progress made in developing RSE resources, particularly through collaboration with CCEA, who we would like to particularly thank for the sensitive way in which they have done this. As part of our partnership with schools and communities, we support the use of CCEA's RSE Hub, which provides resources for teachers, but we ask that these resources must reflect different worldviews, such as the Christian belief in the sanctity of life or that of abstinence from sex until marriage. The TRC stresses the importance of professional development for teachers delivering RSE, calling for fully funded, regular training. We also advocate for transparency when using external providers for RSE content, ensuring that these providers align with the school's ethos and that parents are informed about what is being taught. Whilst we suggest that issues around RSE begin at home, we strongly believe that RSE should be grounded in the ethos of individual schools, particularly those with a non-denominational Christian ethos. We argue that it cannot be taught in a value-neutral way, as discussions around relationships and sexuality inevitably involve value judgments. Schools should have the freedom to teach RSE in line with their Christian ethos, which they believe nurtures the holistic well-being of students. On abortion and contraception, parents should be fully informed about the content and approach of RSE classes and have the right to withdraw their children from lessons on these two areas. We support a balanced approach where parents' rights are respected without compromising the educational needs of students. We recognise the importance of teaching about consent and healthy relationships to protect young people and to prevent sexual violence, particularly against women and girls. We emphasise that students need to understand consent to ensure their own safety and to treat others with respect. We acknowledge the relevance of the Gillen Review and support RSE's role in fostering respect and understanding in relationships. So to conclude, our response to you reflects our commitment to high quality RSE that respects the Christian ethos of controlled schools. We advocate for an approach that allows young people to explore moral and ethical issues in a safe environment, tailored to their individual needs and supported by school policies. By grounding RSE in the values of the school and involving parents in the process, TRC believes that RSE can foster healthy, respectful relationships that prepare students for the complexities of modern life. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee.
Thank you, and thank you for the written briefing that preceded that as well. It was very thorough, very detailed, and has given us a lot to work with. So that is appreciated. I'll make a start, and there's a lot of areas that we could cover, given just how detailed your initial briefing was. I think the first thing I would want to just draw out is that your briefing sets out at one point the view that young people should be encouraged to engage with RSE as critical thinkers, is the phrase that is used, and it should be delivered reflecting a range of ethical and moral viewpoints. But then, as in your presentation today, you also emphasise that primacy of schools being free to deliver RSE in line with Christian ethos. Do you at the TRC see any conflict or tension between those two positions? And with that in mind, would you be able to set out sort of what you would say is good practice of RSE delivery that balances that balance and range of ethical viewpoints and moral viewpoints and the freedom to deliver RSE in line with a school's ethos?
I would suggest that our views are probably completely the opposite, in that for me, critical thinking involves the breadth of worldviews. I think one of the things that people are slightly scared of in today's society is that they're potentially only allowed to say what is current, that they're scared to be able to voice their own opinions in case they're perhaps politically incorrect. And so I think one of the issues that is dear to our heart is that in considering how to help students and indeed teachers to be critical thinkers, then they have to look at the different stances and viewpoints around this. You can't take a neutral stance on RSE, nor can you take a neutral stance on anything in education. It is more than facts, it's more than biology, it's more than the law, It is about worldviews and examining those worldviews, and that's what creates critical thought. And that, as a teacher, one of the things that I wish to promote is critical thought in a classroom. Our classrooms are very different places now, Chair, as you'll know, than they were when I was at school, and perhaps even when some of you were at school, where the teacher was the pedagogue who simply transmitted knowledge and the pupils, like sponges, absorbed that knowledge. Teachers are facilitators of teaching and learning now, and so they create opportunities for learners. They create opportunities to facilitate the learning process and for students to become independent in their learning. So if that's not critical thinking, I don't know. Anita or Rebecca?
I was just going to suggest as well that in the modern classroom, because we're teaching from a specific ethos, doesn't mean that that viewpoint or that worldview is necessarily given primacy within the classroom or within discussion. If you remember, well, you probably do remember doing GCSEs and that sort of thing, the idea of balance within your essays. So all of this discussion, teachers practically are literally sometimes playing devil's advocate. It's one of the accepted pedagogies within a classroom discussion, is to really challenge children and get them thinking about and from other viewpoints. And so in none of our schools do we advocate simply looking at it through one particular, whether that be a Christian perspective. You know, we advocate, we present them with as many different opinions as we can, and as Andy said, facilitate them to come to their own conclusions.
And that's really helpful. I suppose that was what my question was just trying to draw out. It was just, where does that sit? The balance of worldviews was very clearly set out at one point in your briefing, but then there is a big focus on ethos, and it's just trying to understand how that plays out. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I've understood it correctly that your view of good quality, you've used the phrase excellent RSA, and I know when we've met before, that's a phrase that you like to use, and I think we all would want to see excellent RSA as something that would be delivered for our students. But essentially setting out the range of views on an issue, the sort of broad sort of sets of opinions that might be out there, but that ultimately students can make their own critical decision and are free to express their views, whatever they may be on those. Okay, no, that is very helpful. One of the things I wanted just to draw out beyond that then is if we're looking at it in that context. One of the things that can become a sticking point in this discussion is this use of the phrase sort of either fact-based or scientifically accurate. So I wanted just to get your sense on really leading on from what we've just discussed there. From the TRC's perspective, would you be comfortable with an approach to RSE that sets out some of the facts and things that are in undisputed facts, because I know there can be the dispute around what is facts, but the facts that about what is the legal framework around abortion, or what are the options available to protect your sexual health, or what are your options to prevent early pregnancy, what are the different family types, what different sexual identities do some people identify as. In setting those out, is that something that you feel in a school context is appropriate, that all that should be on the table, but then a broader moral framework can be put around that for future discussion? Just is that when we talk about fact-based RSA or scientifically accurate, is that something that you would feel comfortable with, or if you want to expand on any of that, because I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth.
You don't need to. No, absolutely, of course. We live in a multi-faith and multicultural society. We live in a society which consistently and continuously evolves. And whilst we as Christians believe our message stays the same through biblical truth, we respond to that. And so there are different ways in which people live as families. There are different ways in which people find themselves attracted. If pupils were not made aware of that, it would be a sad state of affairs that they didn't understand. As long as it is about that element of the facts before we get to the moral framework which is around it, or the moral lens maybe perhaps through which we look, as long as the fact base is fact and not promotion of a particular lifestyle. Because of course it's factual to say if you do not have sex you won't get pregnant. That's entirely factual to say that. But I do think, and I go back to one of the earlier points that I made, there might well be teachers out there who are scared to say that. Because if one looks through this And Bex has some figures for us in the strategy, but if one looks through some of the stuff on RSE, there seems to be almost an implication that teachers should recognise that children below the age of 16 at certain stages are sexually active. And that, well, actually, we other organisations have done some figures around the fact that those numbers are steadily decreasing. But there are then teachers who might well be scared to say, but abstinence is entirely okay. Bex, on the government strategy on that one?
So it was the 2008-2013 Sexual Health Promotion Action Plan, which was drawn at a Stormont, and one of the goals or targets in that was that 92% of young people between the ages of 16 and 11 and 16 would not become sexually active. Now, in follow-up research, we found that the statistic of 92% was still accurate in 2010, but as of currently, I can't find a follow-up to that. And this would be in keeping with the strategic objection, or number 5 in the Public Health Action Plan, which is about excellence in RSE and the RSE curriculum.
Okay, so, facts are there, and facts are there to be taught. But I think our view very much is we need to be careful around promotion and making assumptions about things which may not be true. Anita, you have enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Final question on this really for me is just does the TRC have a view, and you've referenced abstinence as an element to this, in terms of young people who may be sexually active? Do you have a view in terms of RSE's role in terms of promoting good sexual health and options for contraception for young people? I'm not saying promoting sexual activity, but for the reality that for some young people that they will be. Do you have a view on RSE's role in that space?
The view is that RSE's role is vital, regardless of whether children are sexually active or not. They need to be taught about consent. They need to be taught about respect. They need to be taught about what a healthy relationship is. I don't think it matters whether someone is sexually active or is not sexually active. The presumption is that many or most young people will be sexually active at some stage. Sorry, Anita.
No, I was just going to suggest that as churches, we have no objection to, for example, teaching about contraception. If that's one of the things that is being added as a health protection. Again, not on the assumption that all children are then going to use it before the age of 16, and we would lay that out as part of the health objectives, but certainly on a safety concern and a concern for all people and in the future for their future education. Absolutely, we have no worries about laying out how and the facts of where it can be.
And clearly
and how
in
it can
the
be
context
procured.
of legal ages of consent and
Yes,
all of those things which are absolutely
With all of
critical in
the
terms of the education.
Right, may I add? I think it was the 2021 report out of Westminster discussed the importance that excellence in RSE doesn't necessarily encourage sexual exploration, but it's about teaching young people healthy boundaries and what is consent and what does that look like so that they can make informed and healthy decisions as to when it's age appropriate for them.
Well, I'm conscious I've taken up time. There's probably some other stuff maybe around engagement with parents and young people. Maybe hopefully other members will pick that up. I'll bring the Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks for the presentation. Andy, just in terms of following on from the line of question that Nick was following through there, in terms of what's factually accurate or scientifically accurate. So let's take a scenario. It's factually accurate that some people are attracted to people of the same sex. It's factually accurate that there are same-sex relationships and so on. And you said we need to bring, what's factually accurate to the table, but then we have to bring a moral framework as well that reflects the ethos of the schools that you represent. One of the difficulties in that is that the moral framework that some people would bring would say that homosexuality, to quote, is an abomination, that it's sinful, that it's wrong, and so on. So, in terms of the schools that you represent, would that be being brought to the table, that type of attitude?
Can I answer your question in an alternative way.
Whatever way you want.
Let me give you an example about an organisation that I know about, because somebody contacted me about it. An organisation who went into school during anti-bullying week, and within the first 5 minutes, I had a group of sixth formers together, and this was in, no, it doesn't even matter what area or what kind of area it was in Northern Ireland. So the pupils were all asked to raise their hands if they thought that homosexuality was wrong. And some of the pupils raised their hands. This was in the first 5 minutes. And the person who was leading that workshop turned to them in front of everybody else and said, "You're bullies." This was during anti-bullying week. And so those children, those young people, had their own worldviews. I don't know whether it came from a faith position or not, but they had their own worldviews about what their view on homosexuality was. But they were told quite categorically by a visiting group, who would also be involved in the delivery of RSC, that believing something made them wrong or made them bullies. So, there are everyone within our school communities, everyone will have a different view on issues to do with sexuality. And this is why our concern is that you have to take the facts with the moral compass and understand that these issues are so sensitive that you can't just get into biology, legality, right, wrong, etc. You have to be able to take the moral, everybody's moral standpoint on this one.
But there's also, an answer to that. There's also the fact that our primary part of our ethos is respect for the person, and an anti-bully. Everything that we teach should fall within that sort of overarching idea of respect for the individual and respect for and care for the child. So any type of bullying, that, as Andy described it, or any homophobic remarks should not be allowed in the classroom, and should be moderated. And teachers are taught how to manage class discussions, specifically whether it's for RE or Learning for Life and Work or PDMU in the primary school, so that they're taught how not to allow objectionable and disrespectful views, and that everybody is important no matter what their choices are. So I think that is very much the idea, and the ethos of the school is care for the pupil and for them to be at the heart of everything we do. So it wouldn't be recommended any form of disparaging, disrespectful
I would have no
comments.
difficulty with that. I mean, there shouldn't be homophobic abuse happening within the school setting. My difficulty is, and getting back to the main point of the question, if the ethos of the school says that homosexuality is wrong, it's sinful, and it's an abomination, how does that make a young gay person in a school feel?
I would have to. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm going to just jump.
You're going to jump in
and
yeah.
So our schools have a non-denominational Christian ethos. So that teaching that you're outlining there, that homosexuality is wrong and abomination, is not the teaching of all of our churches completely, every single Christian church. So there may be churches within that, but we don't reflect the teachings of one particular denomination.
And control schools as well are open to those of all faiths and none.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so there will be a Christian ethos which permeates that school, but that Christian ethos is one that is based on the cornerstone values of C.S. Lewis would have espoused them, of love and duty and tolerance and respect and inclusivity. I would know of no school which would have an ethos that would espouse what you're suggesting.
Okay, I accept that, but let me put this to you, because the previous witness here at the committee, the NSPCC, and other witnesses have said that there's a wide variety in terms of the quality and the quantity of RSC that's being delivered in schools. And what we're trying to drill down into is whether that's connected to the ethos of the school, which may be hostile to particular relationships or particular topics within the RSE curriculum. So there's no question there. I'm just throwing that out. Okay, thanks.
Only indication I've got at this stage is Danny. So
yeah, thank you. And just a wee follow up from what Pat is saying, I suppose, for me is how can you teach excellent RSE in the framework of morality without judgment and not having compassion?
How can you teach it without judgment?
Mm-hmm.
You can't. I think everything that we teach, there's a judgment to it. There's a value judgment, there's a moral judgment, and we go back to the point that the chair made about critical thinkers. And so
when we're
children...
talking about science,
what's that?
When we're talking about science, and you bring morality into it, that brings in judgment.
Of course.
How can you get excellent RSE teachings then?
Because, well, sorry, I'll let
No.
Bex, you come in first.
I think it goes back to the critical thinking. It's about teaching children to think about everything. RSE, it can't exist in a vacuum. It's just not possible. Everybody has a world or a viewpoint that's shaped by the world that they've grown up in or the world that they live in. So this is about, and I'm not from a teaching background, so I will defer to my colleagues. This is about teaching kind of holistic viewpoints and teaching it. Anita, I'm going to jump to you. I think you can probably work this better than I, but just it's about encouraging critical thinking and encouraging people to think about all aspects of it. But that it doesn't have to. That can be done within a Christian ethos of a school.
Let me go back to my former point, which is factual. If you do not have sex, you will not get pregnant. Let's say somebody makes that statement. I would heartily expect that every pupil in that class is going to make a judgment on that statement. That judgment may be, I disagree with that. That judgment might be, that's entirely true, but I don't want to not have sex, and yet I don't want to have a baby, or, right, okay, that's fine, but it's not going to stop me having protected sex, or, so everyone's going to make a judgment on that. If I think it would be a very, very sad indictment of our education system. And unfortunately there are some draconian countries in our world which would promote this, but it would be a very sad indictment of our education system if we expected pupils to simply agree with or obey things that were said to them in the room. I think, as we said, the days of the teacher as the demigod pedagogue who simply said, this are the facts, you believe this, go and learn the kings and queens of England or all the flags of the world or whatever it happened to be. Those days have long, long gone.
Could I just... I think it's true, but bringing in judgment into the classroom doesn't mean that the teacher stands and judges. In other words, you have just said that you're attracted to somebody of the same sex as you. You are wrong in that. I've never encountered a teacher or in my teaching career who has said that. They might say, this came up in class today and we looked at it and examined it, but they're not delivering moral judgments. Andy said we make judgments, but we're not delivering moral judgments or telling the children they must behave or think in a certain way. We might challenge their thinking. For example, we might look at social media ideas about sex where it's maybe we might think it's devalued or it is made into the be-all and end-all of all relationships. And we might challenge that and say, is that actually the case? But we will not say to children, no, sex is only to be used inside marriage. If that's what you mean by judgment, that's not happening in our classrooms. But we are helping children to explore value judgments around these topics.
I could do it for a lot of it. You could talk around abortion, around judgment, and then no compassion. And we don't know the circumstances of why anyone, whether it's a young person or someone else, is why they'd be needing or thinking of abortion. So it's about getting back to that scientific and factual based RSE at a level for all schools. And that's all I was just trying to drill into, is just when you're talking about morality, it's the judgment that comes with it.
No, absolutely. I mean, we should examine all of the factors around. Our point is that we don't just want to give them scientific. I mean, we can do that in biology. How our pregnancies ended. We can give them biological facts, and there are these different ways and that sort of thing. But we want to explore it, so that the consequences for women before and after, and what if they don't make that decision, and what if they do, and the various factors that might lead to that decision being made, and encourage these discussions in class, because the value of these discussions is that it prepares them for some time in the future when this might become an issue in their lives, so they can play around with the decisions in the classroom, but without delivering normally we would say these Christian churches believe it is wrong, and these Christian churches believe it depends on the situation, and other faiths we might look at what their teachings on that topic is as well.
I mean, if you look at the religious education curriculum, Key Stage 4, A level, AS level, abortion is a key topic that is looked at. And it's pulled apart, looked at it from all of the different avenues, and moral judgments will be made. But the class together will explore the various strands, the whys, the where nots, and indeed, as you say, the particular vagaries of specific examples as to why someone might be considering it, someone who may never have considered it in their life before, etc. Et so these things are, thoroughly looked at. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Danny. Michelle, you had indicated next.
Thank you, and thanks so much for coming in. I appreciate it. Teachers are really important in this conversation around RSE. These are very formative years. Teachers are very influential and can really shape how effective delivery is. In your briefing paper, you do make a statement that teachers should not be forced to teach things with which they ethically and morally disagree. So I'm just wondering how that's handled within your schools when that scenario emerges. What are the ways that the schools are encouraged to deal with that? And also just in terms of evaluating the effectiveness of RSE, what do you think is the best way to do that?
Well, I take that one.
Beginning.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? It really is a tough one. So teachers are expected to deliver the Northern Ireland curriculum from foundation stage right through Key Stage 4 and up to A level. A level and GCSE are different because they all split into specific subject, particular curricula. And so really from foundation to Key Stage 3, teachers are expected to deliver the curriculum, but they're not expected to deliver all of the curriculum. The Minister himself said that in an answer to an Assembly question a few months ago. So there's that understanding there that teachers may not be expected to deliver everything. But the fact of the matter is that teachers are professionals. I don't know if you folks are talking to the teachers' unions at all about this. I would hope that you are. They'll have their own particular view on this one. But I do think there are a number of things that have been suggested over the last couple of years that the teachers' unions will probably have a very clear view on. So that might be very useful, but that's just me wearing another hat. But teachers are professionals. And a lot of the questions that we've been having, Pat and Danny and others, about moral judgments, teachers will have their own views in their own hearts, in their own minds about things, and they will deliver the curriculum. However, I think from a school-by-school basis, if a teacher has a huge moral issue with something, then they'll go and speak to their boss about that. We firmly believe that this is an area which is difficult to teach. It's probably one of the hardest areas to teach. It's embarrassing to teach it. It can be awkward to teach it. Try teaching RSE to a group of third-year folks, and it's icky. It really, really is. And so teachers need to feel that they're properly upskilled. That's being done in the initial teacher education colleges. That they have places that they can turn. We've got the SEA guidance and the RSE hub. And that they have somewhere where they can go if they feel awkward, as they would about any part of their life as a professional. And that's to their line manager, to their principal. There was a second part of that question, Michelle, I'm sorry.
I'll come back to what you've just said though. Would you then, are there circumstances then, for example, that you would go to a third party organisation outside of the school to deliver certain aspects if there's any resistance within the teaching body to do that?
I'm not sure you go to the third party because there's resistance within the teaching body. I think you would go to a third party because they're an expert in the field. And we know there are experts in the field out there. We know there are organisations who come in and deliver RSE because of what I've said. It is a subject which some people can feel uncomfortable. And I'm not talking about their moral or their faith worldview. I'm talking about just because of the nature of the stuff that's in it. And there are organisations that are out there. And we've said it in our documentation too, these organisations need to have the sign-off of the governors. They need to know where they're coming from. They need to know what their worldviews are. They need to know how they're fitting in with the school's overall ethos. They need to be sympathetic to that. There needs to be situations put in train that the teachers, and let's not forget, no one knows a set of pupils better than their class teacher with regards to their educational needs. And so that needs to be taken into consideration when an external body comes in, that teacher needs to be there, needs to be running point on it, needs to be able to oversee what's going on, not least so that they can then follow up afterwards with issues that have been discussed.
And would you have a situation, I think my original question was about how you handle the teacher wanting to opt out. Would you have a teacher maybe teach part of a curriculum and then get to the bit that's difficult and withdraw at that point, and then
if somebody has better expertise there, that would, I'm sorry, Michelle, I'm just going to stop in a moment because Dr. Gracie has a class at 4 o'clock, so thanks Anita for coming. So that's how dedicated she is. She runs up from Strawmillis to here and back down to Strawmillis. On Wednesday afternoon's supposed to be sports afternoon, but there you go. Thank you, Anita. Talk to you later. Sorry, Michelle.
We'll go on to the second part because we've already covered this now. So it's more about then the evaluation of the RSE and its effectiveness of being delivered in the classroom. How do you think that should best be done?
Well, that needs, any curriculum that is set out to be followed by all schools, and that really comes at Key Stage 4, doesn't it, with GCSEs and A-levels, that is constantly being reassessed by the awarding body. So we currently have a scenario where, apart from the mandated elements from the Secretary of State, the curriculum for RSE is developed in a partnership process at individual school level. There is guidance under PDMU or LLW, but curriculum should be evaluated at school level. Okay, that is done because of the understanding of the school and the teachers of the needs of their pupils and the sensitivities around their local community. No one, as I say, knows better than the locals. Thank you.
Could I just come in ETI, in terms of an ETI role around RSE?
Yes, well, I mean, that's ETI's role, is to come in and just to fly the flag, if we may, because we're at the Education Committee. The view of the churches is that ETI should be coming in to inspect RE. There, I've said it, okay.
Yep, that's good.
Right,
We've
been asking for that for quite some time. And Chair of the Education Committee, we've been asking for the RE Advisory Group to be back up and running. I do know that there's only so many staff in SEA and they've been dealing with RSE matters, so if you could finish the mini inquiry and get them back to their jobs so we can get an RSE hub up, or an RE hub and up, that would be brilliant too.
That is noted, and certainly from my perspective, welcome, so thank you. That's great. David, you had indicated next.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just to say, on a personal note, I welcome and think it's a helpful observation, a factual one, to say that a secular approach or an atheistic approach even is not a neutral position, because I think so often in the modern world, not in this committee, I'm not having to dig at anybody in particular, but it's a secular position is held up as though it is a neutral position, and instead it's just another one of many varieties of worldviews out there. And I think it's right to say you need to engage critically with these sort of ethical debates, and I actually think you can have all the facts, but if you don't engage with the many other viewpoints out there, whether that's a faith or atheistic or secular approach, then you're not really preparing the child for real life, because once they leave that school, they're going to be out in the real world. I just wanted to focus in on a couple of issues that we'd talked about with some other witnesses when they come in. Just to be clear, I think I've said many times now that sometimes I think we talk past each other on these discussions, and we avoid the bits that are most divisive and instead talk about things that actually we're all agreed on, which leads to misconceptions. Can I just, would you say that the schools that you represent are perfectly relaxed and happy with the safeguarding teaching that should happen in our schools as part of an RSC approach? We had NSPCC in earlier talking about the PANTS initiative that they have, and I think Stand Up Speak Up. Is that those kind of things? Is there any degree of resistance to those programs within your schools?
Oh, gracious, no. PANTS, I can tell you, PANTS is taught at Stranmillis to our student teachers as well. It's a superb scheme. As are the others. There's no resistance at all to safeguarding being taught.
That's good, and good having on the record.
A quick answer to your question.
Yeah, and the chair will appreciate that. We had
full of Daily Mail folk there, yes, two of which are my colleagues.
With the Catholic Schools Trustee Service in last week, and one of the things they spoke about was the need, where there is an opt-out, for that opt-out to actually have more flexibility, that actually the opt-out not applying across the year, because as we've just said, some of those safeguarding issues are not things that maybe parents would want their child to be removed from. They're concerned about specific aspects of the programme, but quite often people will opt out and then miss the entire year's worth of classes on that subject. Is that flexibility of an opt-out something that you would share that there's need for as well?
I'm going to be very careful here that I don't say something that undermines anything that my brothers and sisters from Catholic Trustee Service said. There is no opt-out in RSE except for that which has come in following the Secretary of State. There is no opt-out, and nor should there be an opt-out. Our view as the churches is that there shouldn't be an opt-out. Too much importance to be taught in RSE. All of the issues we've discussed, with consent, with respect, with safety for women and girls, all of the things are core and vital. The opt-out are for specific reasons around abortion and contraception. And those reasons are because there are hugely sensitive issues with regards to people who follow a religious worldview. And Christians, and as Anita said, Christians have different views and the denominations have different views. But if I taught in a maintained, Catholic maintained school, how on earth could I stand up and teach with regards to abortion? The Catholic Church is very clear on that. And so we have to be very sensitive. So those are the two issues on which there is an opt-out. We firmly believe.
Could I maybe just come in there, just on the sort of I think the point that was made last week that David is referencing is that the concern was raised by the witnesses that if you opt out, maybe because you have an issue with abortion, that applies in a blanket form across the whole curriculum. It just applies for the year, and I think
Chair, it doesn't.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
It
was surprising. Nor should it. And I think
it was surprising to me. So that's interesting to hear.
And I think, well, perhaps then, perhaps in the reality of what may have gone on in school life is that if there is a timetabling issue at post-primary school, that if a parent has contacted a school to say I need to opt out and these sorts of things, it has perhaps become easier at a school by school level that person opts out on period 3 on a Tuesday morning or whatever it happens to be, and maybe that's what it is. But apart from that, I can't see how a parent would opt their child out.
Perhaps something to get clarity from the department.
Then could I just ask them more in general terms? Do you think sometimes the debate around RSE we're giving more heat than light at times, and there's a perception that I think some from a non-faith point of view, or certainly a non-faith in schools point of view, believe that there's some kind of indoctrination going on where teaching is almost similar to a sermon in a church, and likewise actually some of those from a more conservative position believe that the opposite is occurring, where schools are being used to indoctrinate their children, and we both need to perhaps be a bit more understanding of each other's approach.
Absolutely, Dave. I couldn't say it any more clearly. I mean, schools are not Sunday schools. All right, so I think about the different things that we represent as Transferor representatives, with regards to supporting the writing of the RE curriculum, for instance. RE isn't teaching religion to children and young people, it's teaching young children and young people about religion. It is about what religion teaches us. It is about how religion helps us answer the big questions in life. And this, you know, I do sometimes think there is a worldview out at the moment which causes us great distress and concern, that our role as churches involved with those schools that we used to own and transferred to the control of the state is one where we go in and we have the puppet strings going or something. I think, and I say this to transfer representatives as they're thinking about going on to boards of governors, we go in to serve. We do it in a voluntary capacity. Some of us put hours and hours and hours and hours into this. Some of us deal with hugely sensitive issues around children and young people, around industrial relations issues. We're doing this on top of our day jobs, as I do this on top of mine. What's our reward for it? And I ask you all, what do you think my reward is for being a transfer governor? I get a front row seat at the school play at Christmas. That's my reward. I do this. Bex does this, Anita. The rest of us do this because we feel called to do this. This is our service. And our churches feel called to support our schools. Apologies to those of you who've heard me say this before, but in every parish, village, town, city, in this place in which we live, there are two constants in every community. That's the local church and the local school. And there has been for 100 years a symbiosis between the two. And if you go to the local schools and you ask the local principals about that relationship, they will tell you about halls that have been lent, personnel that have been properly checked out, and help, money that has been given, resources that they've got that they haven't been able to get elsewhere, things bought for nurture rooms. I was speaking to someone recently about someone in their congregation who gave a substantial amount of money to the church for use for the local school, a little private fund for those wee families that have issues. Because believe you me, in lots of areas in Northern Ireland, as you well know, because they're your constituents, there are folks out there who have to make big decisions about heating or eating. And there are schools who are administering funds given by churches. So that's the reality of what we do. Nobody's going in there for power, for proselytization. And I do, you know, so I do think, but and David, you're quite right on the other side as well.
Just on his time is running
short.
Time's maybe running. Going a wee bit off topic
on the other side as well.
Just to draw the list to a close.
Sorry, Chair. We have seen over the last year and a half, where the same has been true about an RSE agenda, and I hope, you know, that you can assure me in the same way as I assure you of our support that there is no agenda with RSE. That we all want the same thing. We want excellent and high quality RSE.
I think if you go back to the introduction, it is about meeting the needs of young people and helping them to explore their own moral and personal views and beliefs. So that is, yes, we are advocating Christian ethos in schools. We don't hide that, but we are encouraging young people to explore their own needs and helping them.
Thanks for your answers and thanks for all that you do.
Thank you.
Cara, you
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for being here. I recognise this is a topic that has a lot of diverse opinions, so I think it's helpful for us as a committee to hear those different perspectives. I have 3 questions, but they're very short. My first one is, can the TRC just, can you outline what pupils or young people you spoke to ahead of coming here today?
We didn't speak to pupils or young people because ours was the view of the TRC executive that we were presenting to you today.
I would recommend there's the SSUNI. They have a really good document called Let Us Learn about RSE, which is crafted and shaped by pupils who talk about the kind of things that are currently absent in RSE and things that they would like to see.
I can't say though, Cara, that my niece is the president currently of the SSUNI, Lauren.
Oh, right, okay. Very nice.
And the member for the Youth Parliament for North Antrim. So whilst not officially going to any pupils, we do. She and I do have interesting debates and discussions about this, and I know you know her well.
Lauren, thank you. Okay, my next question is just around the more specifics, deep diving into contraceptives and other things. With the morning after pill, it can be taken up 3 to 5 days after intercourse and can delay ovulation. Does the TRC have a perspective, opinion on that, on how the morning after pills should be talked about in regards to RSE?
Carol, we deal with the policy issues and the policy writ large. How it is the job of schools to get into the detail of the delivery of a specific area within a lesson.
And then just in regards then, I think Danny had touched on when it comes to, different ethical and moral challenges around the topic of RSE, when it comes to abortion on the grounds of being a victim of rape or incest, does the TRC have any opinion on that, or just that should be left to schools when it comes to ethos and RSE?
I need to give you the same answer on that, because I'm aware that today the three of us now, the two of us, are representing the denominational interest of the Presbyterian Church in Ireland, the Methodist Church of Ireland, and the Church of Ireland. As you can imagine, there's a whole range of different views within each of those denominations. So while Bex and Anita and myself may well have different views on these things, we could have different views from many of our own denominations. So we have to stick to what our remit here today is. But Bex is going to come in because
do you have an official stance on either of those?
I was just going to
Bex give you the PCI one.
I can give you the Presbyterian Church's stance, but I'm not sure that's appropriate because I'm here as a representative of the TRC. But we do represent non-denominational churches, and I understand your question, but there's so much nuance in that, and that's part of what we're here to discuss. We appreciate that you cannot polarize or turn these debates into black and white because you lose the nuance, and I think that's maybe where there's a loss of respect in the conversation.
Yes.
So I can certainly have a conversation with you afterwards and discuss the Presbyterian Church's position,
I'd be open
but
to
I'm
that.
not sure it's appropriate as a representative.
I would find it a morally awkward one to bring in, talking about morals when it comes to rape victims who, with the topic of abortion. But no, thank you for being here today. I mean, again, as I say, there's diverse beliefs, but I think we've had a really good conversation with the NSPCC today about this kind of education as prevention. So it's my personal belief and my party's belief that every child should have access to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Peter, you had indicated.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just have two questions. The first one, guys, is how important, because it's reflected several times in the documentations obviously we read through, how important is Christian ethos in your schools?
Is at the very core of everything that we do and we are in our schools. It's at the core of all of the schools in Northern Ireland. Each of the three, apologies if I leave smaller sectors out, but each of the three main sectors have been founded on Christian principles and remain that way. And it is not about Bible stories. It's about the values that I spoke about, the cornerstone values. And it's about respecting those who disagree or don't hold those values, whilst understanding and firmly believing that those values are the cornerstone for our society and have been for millennia.
Second one, that was nice and short there, Chair. You're impressed.
Happy with that.
Again, picking up on another theme, I was just actually talked about by my colleague Cara there. We had NSPCC and we were talking about a whole range of issues with them, and what we certainly the third week of the committee, again I'd want to reflect this, that there's lots of things we agree on. So I've scribbled down here things like consent, safeguarding, online safety, preventing violence against women and girls, and you noted it all four. And sometimes I sort of think in terms of where we end up with this committee, and how it just got the terms of reference up here in terms of looking at how we reach conclusions on the need for reform and make recommendations accordingly. I sort of think that there's a lot of areas I think we would agree on. Would you say that, I mean, for example, just giving you those four areas, do you think those are really important to be included in, an RE syllabus in schools and taught in our schools?
In an RSE syllabus? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, absolutely. They're clearly part of it. I mean, I think we've said throughout this discussion that those are clear things that pupils should see and experience and indeed not opt out of.
I think they're all necessary for young people to understand what healthy relationships look like and to be able to make judgments based on what they've learned about themselves and what they've learned about the world they live in, and not necessarily because it's been taught to them at a family level or based on the worldview they've been brought up in, but allowing them to make an informed decision.
Or what they see on the internet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
All right, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. That's all the indications that I've got. So really that's that evidence session concluded, and thank you, and also pass on our thanks to Anita for your time this afternoon. All of these evidence sessions will start to be drawn together into a final report and all the key themes coming through. So look, thank you for your time, and look, again, you know, we're very happy to engage in other issues. You referenced RE as one perhaps that the committee might want to look at in the months ahead once this inquiry is concluded. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Cara, can I get your contact details,
Yeah,
and I will
absolutely.
be in touch with you?
So just while witnesses are being seen out, if we can quickly check if there are any actions arising from that. I didn't identify anything in terms of any
They're one of our
specific
heroes,
follow-up,
by the
and
way.
then we will move to a comfort break because we have a bit of a tech handover. So can I just check any issues
Yeah,
in
I was
particular?
going to say.
Nope.
All right, let me see. I'll write my wee details.
Could we move into closed session?
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee room.
Broadcast. We are back into open session. So we are moving on to item 8 on the agenda, which is an oral briefing from the Daily Mail, and if you're happy to bring the witnesses through. So I would refer members to their packs. There's a briefing note from the committee clerk at page 124, and a briefing paper and reports from the Daily Mail at pages 125 to 161. I think we may have an additional attendee here from the EA today, who we can introduce. I'll let all the witnesses get seated. Okay, not that one. Good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome here. I'm sorry we've maybe kept you waiting a little bit, but we're very glad to have you here this afternoon to speak about the Daily Mail, and we have a briefing with a bit of PE focus in a couple of weeks at committee as well, so this will be good to help inform some of those discussions as well. So I'll do quick introductions and then it will be over to you. So with us today we have Dr. Barbara McConnell, Senior Lecturer from Stranmillis University College. We have Dr. Brenda McKay-Redmond, Senior Lecturer also from Stranmillis. We have Dr. Gavin Breslin, Head of Research from the Daily Mail Network Northern Ireland, and we also have Nicola Topping from the Education Authority, who joined us at short notice today, so we're very, very glad to have you here. So really at this stage, I mean, I'm very happy just to hand over to yourselves for any initial presentation you want to make. I think we have a bit of tech set up for a presentation, which is great. If I could ask that we keep that to up to 10 minutes, and then we'll move to question and answer. And we generally look to 5 minutes per inquiry from each member. Conscious when we have a larger panel, it can be difficult to stick to timescales on that. So if I could encourage maybe one member of the panel to take each question, unless there is a real need to maybe to cross over. But if whoever's best placed to deal with each inquiry, just so that we can get through everything that we want to cover today. And if I do have to sort of cut anybody short, it's not because we don't want to hear from you. It's just we have a clock ticking. But really at that stage, other than to confirm, just we're glad to have you here. Hand over and we'll hear for your presentation.
Thank you. I'll start on behalf of the members here for the network. Good afternoon everyone, and thank you for the invite and this opportunity to present to you all about the growth, the research and the trajectory of the Daily Mail in Northern Ireland. I suppose we start off with what is the Daily Mail, in case people aren't aware. It was started by a head teacher in Scotland, Elaine Wiley, in a primary school in Scotland, and it was to try to encourage children to have an initiative to walk, run, jog, wheel for 15 minutes, a minimum of 3 times a week. It's fully inclusive, improves the physical, mental health and well-being of children, and just a few statistics then. 5.2 million children are signed up to it worldwide. It's in 99 countries across the world. There's 20,000 plus schools and nurseries taking part. But then the statistics for us here in Northern Ireland is very significant. We have 586 schools in Northern Ireland as of May this year. That's 70% of our primary schools are actually registered doing the Daily Mail. And we've 86 early years settings, and that includes playgroups and day nurseries. When the network formed, when we came together and formed the network in 2019, there was only 23% uptake. So we have certainly increased the growth of the Daily Mail. To keep with the running theme, I suppose the starting blocks of the Daily Mail network, it started really with ourselves then working with our undergraduate students on a health and wellbeing module, and we felt that we needed to have a health and wellbeing initiative that we could introduce, do ourselves, and these were the future teachers and role models and leaders going out into the schools, and that they could take that with them. It started with a symposium with the British Psychological Society conference in 2019, and the theme of that conference that we were invited to talk at was building better psychological futures, so it sat really well for us. The recognition of the Daily Mail then happened. We realised it was in trusts and lots of areas, but there was no kind of combined network for this, so that's why we decided we would form this Daily Mail network in Northern Ireland, and all the people that were part of this network and asked to become part of the network had a combined passion for participation and collaboration, and our goal was to have research, engagement and impact. On the network, we have representatives from Queen's University, Stranmillis University, Ulster University, Sustrans, Public Health Authority, the British Psychological Society. We have Belfast City Marathon, Athletics NI, the Education Authority. We have a school represented as Mount St Michael's Primary School, the Western Health and Social Care Trust, the Southern Health and Social Care Trust, and just recently we've reached out to Sport NI and the GAA to come on board as well. So we have a wide representation on the Daily Mile network. We've done a few events that you might become aware of. We've done one with the British Heart Society, Love the Daily Mile, Love Your Heart. We've worked with the IAFA and Chris Little there, and he's hosted a Daily Mile on the football pitch. And that was a school that had 41 different languages registered within their school. So, you know, it was a cohesive activity that the children could do regardless that they had so many languages in their school. Crusaders Football Club, we've been and had a match day with them on the pitch, and we've had previous engagement with Stormont as well. But we definitely need a Northern Ireland research-based evidence, and with that I'll pass on to Gavin, the head of research for us.
Okay, so my name is Dr. Gavin Bresson. I'm based in the School of Psychology at Queen's University, and I just want to take you through, I guess, some of the research we've been involved in with the Daily Mile. My background is in sport and exercise psychology, so I'm a chartered member of the British Psychological Society, and research in this area in physical activity and exercise for about 20 years. One of the key things we wanted to see was what's the evidence base behind before we try and make suggestions for policy or implementation, even though there's some policy and implementation in other countries as well. So we've shared some documents with you. The documents are peer reviewed. So the first piece of research was a systematic review of the Daily Mile to see what sort of effects it has on physical activity in terms of physical activity levels, psychological well-being, mental health, academic performance and cognitive function. And I'll give you some findings from there. And then we had a second study that essentially looked at Northern Ireland or the north of Ireland to see how many people were actually engaged in the Daily Mile and what we can actually do. From me looking in, and I've developed several different types of interventions that seem to be very heavy in terms of costs, in terms of training. The Daily Mile offers something that's quite easy to do, but it still requires some level of training, but it's very, very minimal. We've also converted some of this research into I guess more easily read sort of a summary of research for teachers, practitioners and policymakers, where we see that this could be near enough ready to be lifted to be put into upcoming potential policies or strategies or action plans to help children in our country. So the research question essentially is as on the screen. So what are the effects of participating in the Daily Mile on children's physical activity, physical health, mental health, well-being, academic performance and cognitive function? We were very interested in the Daily Mile doing that. We know there's a strong scientific evidence for physical activity improving health anyway, physical health. Sort of not as much information around mental health and well-being, but it is catching up, and even less so in terms of cognitive function. So we were very interested using the gold standard of a systematic review to work out how many interventions there have been before we can implement this or make suggestions about implementing this and get endorsed to implement it into policy. So we've got a protocol registered. The interventions were between children aged 4 to 12 years, so it's primary schools. We also looked at special educational needs schools as well, and we were particularly interested in any studies that had an intervention group and a comparison against the control, so we had a quite high level of quality we were looking for there. In terms of the outcome measures, I'm not going to go into great detail, it's on the screen for you to see, but we were very keen on having objective measures as well as self-report measures across the key research questions. The only piece there that probably describe a wee bit more is adiposity, which is a level of fitness in kids, and it's measured by BMI, body composition as well, but there's other measures included. We followed, I guess, the gold standard. We had 123 hits in terms of interventions using the Daily Mile. It's no surprise considering it's around 10 years old. Longitudinal studies are even less so. But for that, we found then 13 studies in total to try and develop the evidence and see where there are particular benefits. I have shared the research articles with you, so the complete details are in there. But in terms of physical activity levels of those 13 studies, several of them did show increases in physical activity about 10 minutes or 9 minutes. In terms of public health, in terms of increasing the scalability of that across all our children, that could have protective factors to suggest that there's some 9 minutes can have some health protective factors by increasing physical activity. Physical fitness also increased, so that was through the shuttle run test and a few other tests that were available, and that tended to increase in some of the studies as well. The adiposity indicators like BMI, no surprise for physical activity interventions, it's shown quite a bit. It's quite common in the literature. It's very hard to bring about a change in BMI or levels of adiposity in that age group. Psychological well-being improved in some of the studies. Mental health improved. Academic performance, in terms of some of the data shown that was reported, did improve. We looked at the detail in a wee bit more detail, and we actually found that some of the data, there was missing data, and we weren't totally convinced in around academic performance and achievement. Some levels of cognition did increase as well. In terms of the conclusions from the systematic review, the Daily Mile is performed in a number of schools, over 19,236 by the time we were doing the review, and we suggest that it should be cited as an easy win for trying to increase physical activity in schools. It's gone some way to clarify some of the quality and robustness. Out of those 13 studies, some of the studies were fair to good quality studies, so some of them weren't gold standard, high level of convincing. I think that's because of the early nature of the Daily Mile, but it seems promising in terms of trying to bring about change. Also, the review showed some of the changes I've already talked about in terms of the moderate to vigorous physical activity levels, mental health, and some elements of self-perceptions. Acute bouts seems to improve some elements of, didn't improve cognitive function, but might have improved some elements of other elements of cognitive function. We need, I guess, to maybe explore some kids in this country in terms of longitudinally, in terms of the changes in their physical activity levels and their outcomes. The second study was a data linkage study. So here we were very interested in, so the research questions are how many schools in Northern Ireland are currently taking part, how many schools are following the principles. So there's 9 core principles to the Daily Mile to try and get the benefits. That comes from the foundation, the Daily Mile Foundation. And is there an association between school type, location, school size, deprivation measures, agreement? We have a behaviour change model included in our survey as well, and we reported in the study. Here's some of the core principles. These are some of the things that you can do. It can be quick, can be done in any weather. You don't have to change your clothes. You can do it in a school uniform. You can do it at your own pace. We do encourage running it though. The route doesn't have to change. It's accessible, it's fun, it's low risk. And we suggest, or the Daily Mile Foundation suggests, it should be at least 3 days a week to get some of these benefits. The nice thing about the study is that we were able to link it in with some existing data across the Northern Ireland. And we linked in with some of the school census data, and some of the multiple deprivation measures as well are available on the screen to see how we were able to do that. Importantly, and a number of studies in terms of behaviour change don't include behaviour change models. This is a model that has been used as trial and test, has been used sometimes during COVID and stuff as well, so it's a psychological model. And we asked essentially teachers and principals in around the statements of the Daily Mile and how the Daily Mile could have an increase and have an effect on capability delivered, the opportunity and the motivation. It suggests if they score high in these elements, then it's more likely that the school will adapt the Daily Mile and then will be integrated into their school. We had 609 responses. Usable data, there's 358, so we had a 44.4% response rate, which we feel is representative. There's 19 educational needs schools involved as well. Some of the key findings from this, again in the peer-reviewed research article you'll see more details. 55% of the schools were taking up the Daily Mile. Other schools 31 were doing an active mile, but maybe not following the principles. 5 schools weren't doing any sort of Daily Mile, and none, or some weren't doing the Daily Mile, but they might have done it previously. Some interesting findings here as well. In terms of predictors in around taking up the Daily Mile, there doesn't seem to be much difference between rural, urban areas. Free school means slight difference, but not reported in terms of statistically significant. What we did find, which is a bit of a surprise to us, was in around controlled and Catholic maintained schools. Since the Catholic maintained schools are more likely to take up the Daily Mile. That's not about its targeting. There was no, directed fund to try and recruit some schools over others. That's just came out in our data. And there's no difference across integrated voluntary schools either. In terms of the Daily Mile principles, so they're doing it, but are they following all 9 principles? And we didn't find that all schools followed 9 principles. Would we have liked them to do that? Well, Daily Mile Foundation, of course, would have. But when we look across the different types of principles, we can see that 30% or 31% were following 7 of the principles, 21%, 8 of the principles, 28.2% were following 6 of the principles. So adherence to the principles is maybe some work that could be done in terms of our suggestions about trying to get the benefits. If they follow the principles, we're more likely to get the benefits as a result. In particular, what we found is the pace. Children are more likely to walk it than run it. So we know if we increase the intensity, get a wee bit out of breath, a bit sweaty, that's more likely to improve our health. The frequency in which we're doing it, again, high frequency is 71%, but again, trying to encourage that as well. And again, you can see some of the adherence across the statistics that I'm not going to in great detail. Okay, so in terms of the behaviour change that we asked the teachers and the principals in the round, they felt schools, the Daily Mile schools, they felt and were seen to be more in tune with trying to encourage physical activity across their school. So they says if we had better understand of physical activity, more likely to take part. That's the Daily Mile schools, 74.5%. They had more knowledge on how to be active would be helpful, and they were physically stronger would be helpful as well, and they had more physical stamina would increase it as well. Opportunities, those who didn't take up the Daily Mile were saying that there was more time to include physical activity in the school day. And this is quite interesting for if you compared to England, Scotland, Wales, our school days was shorter. So that may be one of the reasons in which we could maybe try and find ways of implementing it here. And data in England is slightly different as well. Access to facilities, some of the other predictors weren't there. We put everything into a predicting model, a statistical model. And it's called a multivariate binary logistic regression. I'm not going into the detail of that. And we actually found that it wasn't predicting across the social demographic factors and a lot of these other factors. Mainly those were predicting differences. That's a good sign. That means that the Daily Mile is open to all different demographics and people are included. So that's quite encouraging. However, almost twice of the Catholic maintained schools were integrated. That's the only thing that came out of that model. The adoption rates here in the north or in Northern Ireland compared to other studies. So in Leicester, 60% were taken 55%. In London, 45%. The frequency of doing 3 times or more a week, 71% in Northern Ireland, 96% in Leicester, which is a huge figure. Pace, 1% run it. So it would be good if we could increase the pace, as I've mentioned before. The other side of that is any activity is better than none. So if the children are out walking, they're connecting, they're talking to their teachers, they're talking to their peers. That may be where the well-being and the mental health improvements are coming from. And I don't think that should be ignored. So the physical activity levels will increase around the walking, the moderate activity levels. To get the vigorous level, we'll need to run it. Whole school participation, 67% here, while in England it was 52%, so we're doing quite well there in terms of schools taking it up, they adapted across. Okay, so special educational needs schools. So the Daily Mile has been taken up by around, and you can see that there's a slight difference there between the Daily Mile and active miles, so maybe not following the principles, but they're doing some active miles in those schools as well. Some of the core principles that were followed in terms of the pace: 2 schools children run or walk, 5 schools walk, 2 schools all children take part, 5 schools not all children take part. So there's a different variation here. In terms of the frequency, 5 schools perform the Daily Mile every day, 2 schools perform it 3 to 4 times a week. And quite interestingly, here from some of the qualitative feedback from the schools, was very few of our pupils would be capable of walking a mile. So that's actually quite interesting. Okay, well, when we say that the Daily Mile is open to everyone, well, maybe there is some restrictions, and maybe adjusting the Daily Mile would be something that could be looked at, or shorten some components of it. You can see that the quotes here, So it's due to physical disabilities of our children, it's not appropriate or possible to take part, not appropriate again. So you can sort of see that coming out in a few of the codes. Some special educational needs schools in terms of discussion, so limited data that we have on special educational needs schools. More schools reported doing their own version of an active mile than the daily mile. Reports of the daily mile not being suitable for their students was already mentioned, and considerations for the needs to be given on how to adapt the daily mile for special educational settings. We've already had groups and discussions with groups to advise on how that can be done as well. We have some strengths to the studies. First study that was conducted here in Northern Ireland or the north of Ireland. Study included both primary and special educational needs schools. It's a large sample. It's completed by staff members and by the principals. It is cross-sectional at one point in time, so it'd be nice to maybe follow up in this study as well in the future. Some of the conclusions: over 50% of the schools are taking part in the daily mile. That's good. If you look across other interventions, that's quite good. Few factors seem to be associated with daily mile participation in terms of the social demographic factors, again, which is a positive. For maximum benefit or implementation and adherence to core principles, we suggest we should try and adjust it. Capabilities, opportunities, motivation. Again, we can use psychological theory to inform and adjust the daily mile and support teachers and autonomy support and how they do it. And more work needs to be done in certain areas still. And the long-term effects of the daily mile of children in this country, we're suggesting that we need our own randomised control trial where we follow up kids and we do some measurements in and around physical activity and some of the physical fitness measures, but probably more so in terms of psychological well-being, cognitions, academic performance, to understand that with, I guess, more thoroughness. Just some acknowledgements for the research, the Daily Mile Network here in Northern Ireland. The funding from the Education Authority was for the systematic review, and the Public Health Agency for Northern Ireland, the R&D office, funded the cross-sectional study. And to thank Queen's University Belfast for the Engaged Research Seed Fund for developing some of the reports, as of course all the other researchers who were involved as well. And there's some references for you if you need as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you had a lot to get through there, and you did very well getting through it at that pace. So look, thank you for the presentation. It gives the committee a lot to work with. I suppose my question is just what's next for the Daily Mile in Northern Ireland. I mean, what do you think would be the next step? Is it more research? Is it seeing this taken up by maybe Department or EA to fund research, or is it actually around better promotion? I mean, what do you think is the next step for the network?
If we pass to the Education Authority in terms of the research, in terms of how it's been taken up, and then maybe the next steps, and then we can.
I mean, I suppose I'm very conscious of your time, and maybe I could say a few words if that's okay. I suppose within the Education Authority, we do very much recognise the benefit of the evidence-based research and practice, and that is why it has been so good to be a part of funding this piece of research. And I think we would welcome further opportunities to explore the benefits of physical activity, not only for its own sake, but also to promote the emotional health and well-being of children and young people, and by so doing providing them with opportunities to improve their readiness to engage in learning and achieving, which are core strategic priorities for the authority. Children and young people themselves have told us that they describe it as keeping their brain fresh for learning, and one young person suggested that it helped them speed up in doing their work. So children certainly have a sense that it works for them. We know that exercise is important, and the Daily Mile, as a non-competitive, fun and free way to introduce exercise into the daily programme of work and activity within a school setting, it's really important. Resources are free, available to any school who signs up to the Daily Mile, and as we know, no additional training is required for staff, and there is no cost to the school or parents and carers. As Gavin said, they simply wear their school uniform, participate during the day. It's also inclusive, regardless of activity levels or mobility, and children are encouraged to participate in some way, hopefully learning, I suppose, good habits for life. In fact, children have also commented to us that the Daily Mile has also encouraged their parents to engage in physical activity, specifically during COVID. that they made it part of their daily routines. And most recently, and anecdotally, the Daily Mile has been noted as a way of developing a sense of community and understanding diversity within schools and within our communities. Also a social activity, Gavin has alluded to that, and we're very interested in that from a well-being perspective. And to in part answer your question, we do take time with a range of our emotional health and well-being programmes to reference the Daily Mile and encourage schools to take part, because we know the benefit of walking and talking, developing connections, relationships, and enhancing a sense of belonging is key and foundational to good emotional health and well-being in our children and young people. Things that we have done in order to move the Daily Mile forward in terms of schools' interest would have included a live webinar with our researchers here, which is still available. A school's experience of initiating and implementing the Daily Mile is available to other schools. We participate in a lot of the key events that the network facilitate, and we are on the verge with the Daily Mile network of launching a series of animations to support schools and encourage children and young people to take part in the Daily Mile. So we have a number of activities coming forward over the next number of months. We're also encouraging our own staff to participate in the Daily Mile with the launch of a running network for EA this weekend. But I suppose and I could use that as well. All of that being said, I would just want to conclude with maybe just a couple of things that children said, because I think that's the key piece. So some of the young people who participated in our live webinar said that keeps us fit and it's fun to do. They like talking to their friends. And one young man said, and I love this quote, "It gets your energy out, and then you can do the work." So I suppose from an Education Authority point of view, and in terms of the question you're asking, we have a number of core activities that we undertake to promote it, and we have a number of things coming forward for that also.
I think that, yeah, Barbara, did you want to come in there?
Yes, thank you. Probably just to follow on what everybody said, obviously our own local evidence base is very important for us, that we have a separate, education system, and we would like to seek funding to do that. We have a number of events. We have another policy event coming up. One of the things is always about raising the awareness of it, and you can see from the network has really worked hard. We've got a bigger amount of schools signed up. But I think you probably got emails yesterday from Brenda and myself inviting you all to a policy event on the 2nd of December. We'll have some of our colleagues here and some children doing the Daily Mile outside the front of Stormont. We would really love you to come along and show your support as the Education Committee, but also to go back to your own constituencies and to speak to colleagues from your parties and say, will you go out to, we have 70% of schools signed up, but as Gavin showed from the research, they're not all doing it consistently and following 3 times a week and having the benefit for the children. So we'd love you to go out to your local schools in your constituencies and say, are you a Daily Mile school? If not, why not? And encourage them sort of bottom up as well as top down. And I suppose the big ask from us is really to include the Daily Mile in any review of any curriculum or education or any health action plans or upcoming policies, to ask those questions. We see it, where we have seen it work best is where health and education have worked together. Some of our areas, Gavin hasn't gone into all the data on the data linkage study, but certainly anecdotally we have seen areas where public health and the health trusts are there working directly in schools, supporting the promotion and the development of it, and those are areas where it's really working best and working to the benefit of those children. So any other committees that you're on or any of your colleagues are on, to be asking those questions and see how can health and education work to promote the Daily Mile for the better outcomes of the children.
That's great, and I don't want to hog any time because the other members want to come in, and time is against us. If I could ask members just to keep their contributions nice and brief, I'll just bring Pat in as Deputy Chair there.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for that presentation. And I have a couple of kids who have been involved in doing the Daily Mile. The they're also active outside school. They play sport. I'm just wondering, we often hear that when there are resourcing difficulties in school, that PE is the first subject to suffer. Have you heard that yourself? Are you aware of that? And in a sense, I'm not in any way criticising the Daily Mail project, but is it a poor substitute for proper PE curriculum in schools?
I think it's really clear that it's not a substitute for PE. Physical education standalone, and this is in addition to PE. I think if we look across sort of the training of primary school teachers and how much they get in terms of physical education and their curriculum as they're going through training should be maybe looked at, and that means then it's a skill set that the teacher will have to encourage and physical education in primary schools. We have seen in this programme of research and in other programmes of research, when you do go on with an intervention, that maybe someone might say, well, we'll do that instead. It hasn't. It always has to be an extra to what the physical education is. And I think there is a huge amount of work still to be done for putting more time, giving primary school teachers different sort of skill sets and doing things with the resources they have as well.
But do you have any evidence around the delivery of PE in schools that it is one of the first subjects that suffers when there are resourcing problems, particularly in primary school?
I haven't done research on that.
Okay. And just one final question. I don't know whether you can answer this or not. And I'm speaking as someone who has no expertise in the field of sports studies, but I have read that in terms of cardiovascular exercise, you need to be exercising for at least 20 to 25 minutes for it to be beneficial. And I presume that the Daily Mail doesn't take as long as that. Would you want to comment on that?
Oh, yeah, there's variations in different large data sets that would suggest that at one point it used to be bouts of 10 minutes, and some researchers say it's actually bouts of 4 minutes, and some would say now the World Health Organization's guidance would suggest that any movement is better, and that's the Chief Medical Officer would take a view on that as well. So in and around physical activities, any movement's better now than trying to just meet these guidelines. I think this prescription of how much we have to be doing hasn't really helped us much. And I think the psychology of that's quite interesting as well. So we're telling people what they should do as opposed to get moving, get some level of enjoyment, and then I guess move on from that to try and progress it. We also move into sports. Sometimes it's not always about sport, it's about participation as physical activity. There's differences between sport. Sport has a competitive element to it. Exercise has, I guess, a structured element to it. Physical activity is any skeletal movement that leads to energy expenditure. That's what we're promoting. And in the Daily Mile, what we're trying to do is move up through that light intensity, moderate intensity, and then vigorous intensity. If we can move to the vigorous intensity, there's more protective factors.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Pat. Cara, you were in next.
Chair, thank you all for being here. Look, I think this is a great initiative. I think it's really positive, accessible, affordable for all. Anytime, anywhere, kind of feels like the whole vibe of this. I think for me as well, I sit on the ADHD, APG, and the importance of sport, exercise, cardiovascular workouts, and helping children, as you had mentioned there, study in class. I think it's really, really important. My only question is around I really like getting out for a walk and a jog in the evenings, but this time of the year, it's dark in the mornings, it's getting darker in the evenings, and the time to go out and feel safe while doing so is getting smaller and smaller. Do you think, we've just been talking about safeguarding as a whole earlier today, do you think there's more we can do as politicians and as political parties to ensure that in the absence of those moments where young children can go out with their parents and go for walks and feel safe, whether it's darker nights or criminality, do you think we should be advocating at a council level for more affordable access to gyms for children and young people? Or what do you think we could do more of? I'm just mindful in these darker months, I don't want children not being able to get out because they don't feel safe.
Well, I think one of the things that we have learned from having collaboration with all of our partners is that, if I can take the example of even Crusaders football stadium, where, through conversations with them, they were quite happy to actually open their grounds at any particular time that would suit children and parents to come, and it would be a floodlit pitch, and they would quite happily facilitate them walking around it. So I think those kind of conversations where we have unused facilities, and the interesting point with that particular collaboration was the fact that lots of children, even from the surrounding areas, had never been to a football pitch.
Wow.
Or had never been to a football pitch with their parents. So actually having that as a lovely experience for both of them to experience, or for a group to experience in a safe, safeguarded environment, is something that can work and can easily work with no charge or no cost either.
That's brilliant. Because in my constituency, there's a GAA club in Glenullen, which is a very rural area, and the streets are poorly lit given it's rural roads. And they've come up with they want a walking track around the around the club, and it just makes sense. And for rural people, often they do feel isolated and they can't get out in a safe way. So, but no, just to thank you for your work. I think it's really important research and a really important initiative to get children active and parents as well. Thank you.
You, Cara. Danny, you were next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I suppose, thank you for your presentation. I suppose mine's more of comments, because as kids in school, I know particularly the boys have been doing the daily meal, because just before summer recess they were coming, and how many laps they are actually doing. I think the baby was left out a wee bit longer just to burn up more and more of his energy. But for me, it's that mindset of change. I have my kids in all types of sports and they love it, but because it is that change in mindset, and it's so important. And there's other young people that probably don't have the opportunity, so that extra bit of work that's done in schools and going out as simple as a meal, it can lead to so many different things. And I suppose just even from my school, like unlocking new sports, Gaelfast comes in, and you do, like, my boys play GAA and hurling anyway, but they introduced handball last year. Now they're playing handball. I never played it in my life, and now it's like a resurgence in around that wee age group, which is fantastic. And the more we can do that in schools, and I think this is brilliant. And any support I can do within, I know a lot of cross country and cross country running is actually happening in many schools in my wee part of the world, which is another great thing to see. So it's amazing. So thank you. It's brilliant.
Thank you. I suppose it's the idea too of starting from a very young, early age and creating that mindset and that change and having that influence in the home environment as well. But I mean, they also have the opportunity to go on to do junior park runs or to do park runs, or that is available for those who want to become more active. But those kind of lovely conversations and friendships that happen with the Daily Mile are equally as valuable.
Brings the positivity, doesn't it, to them with their own peers. And Pat, as he's just nipped out there, he likes to joke about me going to the gym, but and my boys do the same thing. They really go, look at my six-pack, Daddy, you need to get back out and do a bit of run. But it's that their mindset, they're healthy. It is that healthy body, healthy mind, it all fits in, and education's a great place for it to happen.
I think that the narrative in and around sport sometimes has to change as well. What we're looking for here is healthy kids. So that's where the physical activity piece is. Yep. Not all kids like sport. Not all kids are attracted to it. Some kids may be attracted to dance or drama or other things, but if it's movement involved in it, then that's what we should be encouraging through the curriculum and through our narrative and how we describe it. If kids, for me, in terms of motivation and getting kids involved, it might actually be the connections first. So the connections are coming to, so you're involved in Gaelic games, so assume that there's something in around connecting young kids to age groups, and then being involved in a lighter element of the sport, and then moving towards maybe competition later on. So that's small pieces of connecting kids first. And then with developing the friends and the friendship networks, then they're more likely then to stay involved. And it's actually not the sport that's probably keeping them in, it's probably the friends that are keeping them in, because that's a huge driver, the social relatedness in which we connect with kids. I'm a coach in a sport as well, where I can actually see and I know my daughter as well, but she's interested in sport, she's 10, and she's interested in going when her friends are going and her best friend's going. So I think it's those components of connections is really, really strong. And then around the Daily Mile, when you get kids connected to talk when they're out walking, running, or whatever it is, then any issues that could potentially around emotional well-being could emerge, that might never emerge, could emerge to talk to their parents. So it's providing those opportunities.
Thank you. Michelle, you were next. Just very conscious time is beating us here, so if we keep everything nice and short to get around everybody.
Most people, to be fair, have commented on most of the stuff that I was going to raise anyway, and I think in particular you've taken the conversation to that conversation around physical activity and not just PE or sport, organised sport as we would kind of think of it initially. But how much focus do you think like the Department of Education or other stakeholders are actually placing on increasing physical activity within schools? Because some of the statistics that you've provided here, particularly in the context of Northern Ireland, are really concerning. Like, where was it Northern Ireland children are less active than their UK and European counterparts? Like, why is that? And like, are people doing enough to kind of overcome that?
Yeah, I think we've shown that the Millennium Cohort study has demonstrated that several times now in terms of the number of kids meeting the physical activity guidelines, and that is 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity each day. I think it's just the structures that are available, making things safe, being able to approach and maybe join clubs that are less costly, making things accessible. That's so important for them. Providing opportunities in different sports as well. So opening it up, making places safe, and maybe back to your question earlier in and around at night time and stuff. Make environments safe where people feel they can go out and run. And we do know that there's a difference between males going out and run at night time or early in the morning versus females, and females feeling that they have to look over their shoulder, or they're not feeling safe in that environment. That evidence is there. So what can we do as a society to try and change that and try and safeguard and protect, and actually not have somebody feel as if they're walking out the door and going, actually, I'm worried here. But I think that's a bigger society issue. And then, yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. David?
Thanks, Chair. And I think it's a great initiative, and probably other than walking around this place or the 12th of July, I could do more of it myself. But I was at an event a couple of years ago now, a couple of Christmases ago, at Ulster Rugby, where Craigie Primary School and St Michael's, I'm pretty sure it was, were walking around Ravenhill, and the kids were very excited, and Christmas hats and jumpers and everything else on, and had a great time. One thing from your presentation I just wanted to focus on was that disparity between sort of Catholic maintained and controlled schools, and I wondered if there was any if you'd looked in at all to any reasons why that might be, or why it's present himself. Is there a geographical disparity, east and west of the ban, or other reasons for it that you're aware of?
We couldn't come up with the reasons for it. It was a quantitative statistic. Let's say there was differences there. We've talked amongst ourselves to sort of say, right, are we promoting more in one area than the others? And we can't really come up with the reasons why.
Yeah.
No. And it is one of those things that comes out in data. Sometimes it's hard to maybe understand. Maybe what it's saying is we should be promoting a wee bit more in a certain area.
Honestly, just the reason it alerted me was more this idea that we under-attainment within Protestant working class boys, and whether there's a trend across other things here that align with that. And I'm not an expert in that either, but that's probably what jumped out at me, and why I would be interested to sort of drill into why participation is different in two different sectors now. The other thing was the pace. I'm certainly not going to pontificate on what pace people should be walking or running, but 1% seemed very, very low. Is there a reason for that, do you think? Is it about teachers trying to oversee a class, or is it just a resistance to the actual? Because you think there would be
I think there's a number of reasons at that. You've got it, like I was with at Ulster Rugby, and the children just took off like a rocket after the rugby players, and
MLAs didn't.
Sustaining that for 15 minutes for young children is too much as well. So we do try to encourage that kind of a pace that's sustainable. But the other bit is that I think a fear of teachers they'll fall, we can't, they'll slip there, we have to, let's just walk it. And yet some of the schools that we've seen it in, there's a particular school not very far from here, they have a beautiful big green field at the front, and they all run, and they have been running that since P4 right through to P7, and every child runs it, but they have lovely grounds and facilities, and it is easy for them, and they have already are committed to the Daily Mile, and it's embedded in their policy. They've got it. They have homeworks that they set it with their parents. They have lots of ways that those children are just familiar with doing it, and they've been doing it from day one. Other schools, I think that's the work with our numbers. We have our numbers who have signed up. We now need to support the schools to say, let's find a safe place where they can run. If we can do it, it might be some of the playgrounds aren't conducive to taking off and running on their own. The other bit is about encouraging teachers to do it with them. And some of the schools, again, that are doing it well have teachers who are runners and in running clubs, and they see the benefit. Other teachers are a bit more hesitant and they'll, well, I'll walk with you, but I'm not running. So, there's still work to be done there.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to bring Peter in of no other indication, so I think I'll draw a line at this stage, just given time, and bring Peter in for last question.
Oh, okay. And actually, my question was asked by David, so all I will say is I can't wait to tell my wife that actually whenever I go out walking Max in the evenings, it's any movement is positive movement. I'm going to cite you as a source, Gavin, and that came from the World Health Organization, who I wouldn't always agree with, but I'm going to use them as a source anyway, and just say to Melanie, I am exercising on a daily basis. Come on. Back to you, Chair.
Given how brief that was,
yep.
Does anyone else, Kathy, did you want to come in, Colin? Recovered? Okay, no, that is grand. Look, really appreciate your time. I think in terms of follow-up actions, in a couple of weeks we have some sporting bodies in to look at the issue of PE with committee, and I think we've got a written briefing coming in from the department on issues related to PE and levels of physical activity in schools. So I think this is a really good timing for this briefing, and we can maybe feed some of that stuff through to the department after that session as well. So we'll get a clear note of all this and take that forward. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Given time, while the witnesses are just being seen out, I'm just going to move on to item 9, unless any member wants to raise any action other than really probably carrying some of that information over to our session on the 23rd when we're going to look at sport and PE in a bit more detail, and we can maybe take all of that on the round at that stage. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. That's great. So that takes us to item 9, which is correspondence. So there's correspondence in your packs, pages 188 to 348, and then there's also some correspondence came through in table papers. So there is a note from the committee clerk. I'm just going to raise any items where I think we need a committee decision. Other than that, we will get agreement to deal with things as per the note. If there's anything I miss here that a member wants to raise, please do so when I get to the end of this. So item 9.2 is correspondence from the Economy Committee on the Gateway Review for the 14 to 19 implementation framework. I would really want to just confirm that I would share those concerns, that the Gateway Review was not referenced in that correspondence and was not really referenced in detail at our concurrent committee meeting earlier in the year with Economy. So I would like to propose we write to both departments in similar terms as the Economy Committee and seek a specific response on the issue and also on update on the wider 14 to 19 framework implementation. Are we agreed on that? Take that as an agreement.
Yep.
Item 9.4, page 215, it's correspondence from the Belfast Wide Early Years pilot, which I know was an organisation who had been in touch with committee over concerns around the security of their funding, which was secured for the remainder of this year, which was very welcome. But they are looking to brief the committee on their work in more detail. Absolutely sits in with our strategic priorities, and I would like to suggest, you'll see when we get to forward work planning, extremely tight in terms of space, but I think an invite to an informal briefing would be important. I would be very keen to hear from them. Are we agreed? Item 9.6, it's correspondence from the Parliamentary Excellence Programme, and it's really seeking members' feedback on the effective questioning session. Just raise it for members to note and to return their questionnaires individually. Item 9.8, page 247, it's an invitation from the Middletown Centre for Autism. I think that's an invitation we should absolutely be taking up, and I would suggest maybe through the clerk that we look at that for as early as possible in 2025 for an engagement if members are happy with that.
We could have a committee meeting there.
We could look at seeing if they could host us for a committee. So yeah, I would be absolutely open to that. Thank you, Deputy Chair. Okay, item 9.9, page 248. That it's an invitation to chair and deputy chair of the committee to attend, and I think to chair the policy forum for Northern Ireland keynote seminar, Next Steps for the Education System, and that's on Wednesday, the 15th of January. Unfortunately, I am not available on that morning, and I've given my apologies separately. So happy to defer to the deputy chair on that, or if there's another member.
Well, I've already confirmed I will. It's been held on Teams anyway. So.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's unfortunately a clash for me that morning. But again, if any other members are interested, just would draw their attention to that. Item 9.11, page 269 is correspondence from an individual with some concerns about the structure of the RSE inquiry questionnaire. I think given the consultation has launched and is out and we're receiving responses, I mean, I think I'm content to note at this stage, and if that individual wanted to follow up with any more detail on what their concerns were, you know, they're absolutely open to do so. But I think given that it's now a live consultation, I think really it's to note at this stage. Are we agreed? Take that as an agreement. Item 9.14, I'll just work if I don't get a verbal agreement, I'll move on and take it as such. Item 9.14, correspondence from the Finance Committee clerk on unfilled vacancies across the departments. I just wanted to highlight in terms of the DE figures on that, while the number of vacancies in the department at 73 is relatively low comparatively to other departments. I think the rise over a course of a year of 8 vacancies to 73 is fairly significant as a proportion of the vacancies within the department. So I would want to suggest we write to DE and just get a full breakdown of where those vacancies are, and then we can see as a committee if there's anything more we feel we need to do with that. Are we agreed? We have item 9.16, page 346, correspondence from the Women's Aid Federation seeking to brief the committee in relation to its RSE inquiry. I mean, I would certainly be very happy to open up an invite on that basis, and also just to encourage them to respond to the consultation as well. So are we agreed? Agreed. Item 9.17, page 348, it's correspondence from an individual raising concerns about the role of previous employers informing the Education Authority of any concerns they may have employing a person in the interests of child protection and safeguarding. I would suggest there's probably 2 ways to dispose of that. I think one would be to write to the Education Authority to seek their views on that. They will probably only be able to comment on their own policies, but I think it would be useful to see that, and possibly the Safeguarding Board for Northern Ireland in terms of their views of other external employers to the Education Authority and how they might, in terms of good practice or guidance around that. Are we agreed we go to those 2 organisations?
Agreed.
Item 9.18, and this is on to table papers, page 18. So that is a response from the Minister of Education in relation to his meeting with the Loyalist Communities Council. And the Minister set out that the purpose of the meeting had been agreed to discuss educational underachievement in Loyalist communities. And I'd also, I think as was referenced at last week's committee, confirmed that a copy of the minutes had been placed in the Assembly Library. Can I just check through yourself, Clerk, if that is available to members? Have we got that on table papers, or we have? So those minutes are available. So if members want to refer to them, I suspect this may well be an issue where we continue perhaps to agree to disagree in terms of the detail of that response. I mean, I would just want to put on record my concern that I think what perhaps from my perspective has not been drawn out clearly in this is the extent to which the Minister would assess that the LCC speaks for paramilitaries, and we don't have a sense of to how the Minister assesses that. And my concern would be that if the LCC has any role as a spokesperson for paramilitary organisations, we need a really clear line that they are illegal organisations and that they are prescribed, and that anybody, even with a spokesperson role for those bodies in any form, I remain deeply uncomfortable that they should have any role in shaping education policy, and I want to just put that on record from my personal perspective. I understand the committee will take different views across the board on this. I think there has been some discussion around engagement with working class loyalists, and I think we just need to be very clear that we don't wish to conflate paramilitarism with working class loyalism. You know, I think very clear this committee would not, on any level, I think every party would agree, object to engaging with working class loyalist communities. I put that on the record from my own perspective. I'm not going to make a proposal we write back. I don't suspect we're going to get anything further from that correspondence, but I certainly think it's something members may want to consider when we hope the Minister engages with the committee later in the year. conscious it's an issue we've discussed. I don't want to shut conversation on the issue down at all, so I'm happy to open it up to the floor if anyone does want to make a proposal, but I'm simply noting those comments from my perspective at this stage. So if anyone else wants
Can I come in there? And I said all I had to say last week in terms of whether it was advisable for the Minister to meet this group or not. I don't want to continue that debate, but what I want to flag up is the fact that the Minister has used free school meals as an indicator in terms of assessing underachievement among Protestant boys. And the reason I want to raise that is because in the RAISE programme, he has designed a completely new way of assessing underachievement. It's so convoluted, a lot of people can't get their heads around it. And I did raise it in the Assembly with him a couple of weeks ago in regard to what appears to be an anomaly within this, in that some of the well-known grammar schools in the leafy suburbs can access the funding in the RAISE programme, but other schools in very deprived areas can't. I mean, I'll give you one example. Wallace High Prep School in Lisburn, which charges just under £5,000 a year for students, can access this funding, but schools in the middle of Ballymurphy, Turf Lodge and Andersonstown can't. And I think it's something that we need a greater explanation from the Minister on as to who designed this programme, why were different indicators used. I know the officials and Minister have said they wanted a greater geographical spread, but at the end of the day, it's objective need that should have preeminence when it comes to dispersing public funds, especially on an issue like this.
Well, I mean, I think it's for the committee maybe to make a decision at this stage if we want to follow that up in terms of any correspondence. I do know we have the department in on the 23rd of October, and that may be the best forum to raise those issues with, but I'm happy to take views or if you have a proposal to make or views in terms of whether there's anything we need to raise on that. So I'm opening it up to the floor.
Well, I'm happy to wait till the 23rd. But I'm just flagging that issue up. I think it's an important issue. I've raised it in the Assembly and now I've raised it here in the committee. So.
Yeah. Well, we'll certainly we've I think raised our that as a confirmed briefing on the 23rd. So
we'll do with Fair Start as well.
Yeah. So that we'll have the opportunity there. Those issues. Peter, were you looking to?
No, I was just going to say, look, I mean, I would concur with the Vice Chair in terms of having information around the way that RAISE is designed and how it tackles objective need. My understanding of RAISE is that it's a direct result of Fair Start, and was certainly the plan behind RAISE was to take more of a locality-based approach, because there are pockets of deprivation outside of Belfast and Londonderry in particular that are spread throughout the province, and sometimes the way that funding mechanisms are designed, they tend to target those areas. And so I think the reason for it in terms of this locality-based approach was to actually look at pockets of deprivation outside of those two areas, because there are plenty across Northern Ireland, and target them. That's all I have to say, but same as the Deputy Chair, I'm more than happy to wait till the department's in to ask some questions about that, Chair.
Okay. Are we content to note at this stage, and we'll take that?
It's an important point that Pat raises here, especially when the Minister's reply to us is around and mentions free school meals, and it's not part of the formula. It really does fly in the face of what the officials are saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think there undoubtedly that the questions around how the RAISE programme is being designed and targeted, and I think they're crucial. And I think the 23rd of October is the forum to do that. But it's certainly that'll be noted in the minutes. David, just very briefly to come in.
I understand Pat's concerns. I do think, and I don't have knowledge of what Walsh do, but I think it's important as well that we again drill down and see what the intervention is that they would be undertaking and how that's going to impact, rather than necessarily just stereotype grammar schools in that particular way. Other than that, also to say, I think the Minister has laid out that the meeting was more wide-ranging than perhaps was thought in the immediate aftermath of it. I do think it's legitimate to engage. I'll not go down the full debate again, but I do think it's legitimate to engage with the LCC. I do think it's important to put on record again that my understanding is that the LCC is a body that's committed to moving those who have been involved in paramilitaries away from paramilitarism, and therefore any issues that they've raised about young people within their communities, I think we can at least listen to in that regard, so that young people don't go down that route in future. But also to say, and I will again say that I think on the airwaves, even in recent days, I think some parties have expressed a queasiness about engaging with loyalists that had not applied to them in engaging and sitting in chambers with Republicans at a time whenever the PSNI and others said that the IRA Army Council was still active but not on a war footing. And I think there's similarities that can be joined there, and that queasiness did not seem to be the case then, and I think that loyalists deserve a similar hearing in that regard.
I'm happy to draw a line under the conversation at this stage, and I think one of the reasons why I was not proposing any further correspondence is I doubt we would get agreement.
Yes, no, agreed.
And I doubt
agreed.
when response to said correspondence would land that the committee would views would probably change to any great degree. So are we content in terms of that correspondence? Really, the only issue is unless there's anything to pick up with the Minister when he attends committee, it would potentially be around raise on the 23rd of October. Are we agreed? Item 9.19, mention this very briefly, a correspondence from North Down Primary Principals Group. My understanding is that this does relate back to quite an old piece of committee correspondence, so I'm going to suggest we note at this stage, and perhaps if the clerk could just come back next week with a wee bit of background to the precise nature of the issues that precipitated that correspondence, and we can...
I think it might be online trolling. I only have a postal address for the person, so I'll come back as
soon as we're able to, maybe just with a little bit of background context, if the committee did want to feed in. I think perhaps maybe even to circumvent that, I mean, I'm content to propose that we just write back to them to say that if they have any specific asks of the committee at this stage in relation to that response on their last meeting, we're very happy to hear from them, but I don't think there's enough detail there maybe for all members to be clear on the background.
Chair, can I come in on that one? Certainly, I'm more than happy to support that. I think and I don't have any particular knowledge of this one, but it does look to be, given the fact that this is dated the 3rd of October, they had a recent meeting in August, and there's ongoing concerns in regard to the abuse of school staff. It seems current, even if it dates back to an older issue. Again, I'm not aware of all the details, but perhaps we could write back to the North Down Principals Group and just say, we'd be happy if they wanted to, for example, give us more detail or want to come and whether it's an informal session or whatever, to come before a committee and just explain the context of it all. Yeah.
No, I'm very happy. Are we content with that proposal? Great. Okay, so that takes us on to item 10, forward work programme. Look, and I'll deal with this very briefly, as time has definitely beaten us. A couple of things just to highlight. I just note again with regret the department has come back to decline an oral budget briefing for the committee, which is becoming increasingly concerning to me, and I just want to put that on record again. We are being promised a further written briefing next week with some more detailed distribution tables. I hope they will be more enlightening. I can only speak for this committee. I don't know what other committees are getting in terms of budget briefing, but I just remain uncomfortable that we will no doubt soon be debating October monitoring rounds. We'll soon be debating next year's budget, and we don't yet know how the Minister, what decisions he's made in terms of spending this year's budget. So I just put it on record again. I hope what arrives next week will be more enlightening. Michelle?
I mean, I agree with you. I think I was really disappointed to see that. I was expecting, it had previously said there would be an oral briefing. What powers do we have in terms of the committee, in terms of actually compelling people to come and give us the evidence and the session that we want? That's a general point, I think, around a lot of this, but specifically around the budget.
Yeah, I mean, the standard of candour and provision of information from departments to assembly committees is very high and should be much higher than FOI. And unfortunately, I understand that the October monitoring exercise has been delayed. So the subject of the briefing can't be brought. That's the rationale that I've been given.
I think committee's been very clear that we're not really looking at October monitoring. I think we're sort of thinking that is coming down the track, and this information would be helpful for those considerations. But I think the sense I've had from our discussions on this, that we would like to know what decisions around spending the budget have been taken to date. But a briefing is not coming forward in terms of an oral briefing at this stage. We'll await the written one. The other issues that I just wanted to highlight would be next week. There may be some things that might have drawn members' attention in terms of the 23rd of October meeting. It's a very, very full agenda. It will not be as full an agenda as that, just to highlight that, because I don't think that would be manageable. So we're going to suggest that the early years and childcare briefing is brought back, and that we just have the single briefing from the department. The sports briefing from the department will also be written rather than oral. So I hope that will be a more manageable session on that basis, just to make members aware of that in case there were any concerns. Before we move on from that, can I just check, is everyone content with that?
Can I just clarify that?
Yes.
Sorry, Chair. So the briefing won't be in early years and childcare.
No, it will be raised. It will be raised, and early years they are still committed to coming in. It will just be at a later meeting, because I don't think
13th of November.
we time wise it would have been deliverable, and I don't think we would have been able to give a subject of the importance of early years the time that it needed on that. So that is the 23rd of October. We then hit recess, and just as a couple of things, and there are a couple of weeks there immediately after recess where there are multiple RSE inquiry briefings. I've spoken with the clerk about that this morning, and I think we will be trying to spread those out over time to maybe free up space in those agendas for other aspects of the committee's work. So it's just to highlight that at that stage. So this is very much a draft programme. So beyond that, I don't want to go through the briefing, the forward work plan in any more detail than that, unless anyone has anything they want to add.
Sure, could I come in?
Yes,
Just in terms of the RSC inquiry, or mini inquiry, as we said at the outset.
How many remains to be seen, yes.
It's clear that there are consistent themes emerging. You know, some people agree with the opt-out, others don't. There's a variety of quality and quantity of RSE being delivered across schools. We know all that, and other themes that have emerged. And I'm not expecting anyone to come in and tell us anything different from what we have already heard. I'm open to persuasion on that point if others think differently. And I'm just wondering, is there any way we can truncate this inquiry in some way? Because there are other big issues there at the minute that I would like to get into, saying the whole issue of REAs, Sure Start expansion, even the issue about the phone pouches, and there are other issues I'm sure others would like to get into. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I'll come in at this stage. I think there are a couple of things I would say. Next week we have the youth engagement session, which I think is really crucial. So I would not want to see that dropping off, because I think if we were to produce any report and not having made a meaningful attempt to engage with young people, I think the credibility of any report emerging out of this would be severely compromised. So I would want to be very clear that I think we need to maintain that. I am also aware that there are some key stakeholders who I feel would be quite upset if they did not have the opportunity to present. But that said, I agree, so far in our inquiry, I don't think we are hearing anything that is really raising any surprises. And I think a lot of the times, people, there are clear positions that people are aligning to. So where there may be scope to look at this, and it may be there's quite a lot of stuff in there in the forward work plan from academics, and it's whether the committee would be of the view that inviting written briefings from academics would be an acceptable way to take that forward. So I'm putting that out there for committee discussion, not presenting a view, with the caveat that I think that I would have a slight concern that if we do move to written briefings, that will everybody read them? And in terms of our discussion on a final report, if that leaves us in a scenario where we may not actually have all engaged with the evidence when we're making decisions on any report coming forward. But look, I'm happy to open that up for discussion, or if there are particular stakeholders that anybody feels a written briefing would be more appropriate from. So, I'm happy to open that out to the floor. Deputy Chair, you'd have raised the issue. Is there anything in particular?
I would agree with the issue around written briefings. If there were witnesses who were absolutely insistent on coming to present to the committee, fair enough. But I think we should ask most of those who are on the list to come if they would be happy to give a written presentation to the committee rather than an oral presentation. I mean, I don't want to offend any of the stakeholders. That's not what I'm aiming for. But I put in the caveat: we're not going to hear anything different from what we've already heard in terms of the themes that have emerged.
I'll go back to my RSVP list and speak to everybody.
Yeah, sure. I would agree that it'd be preferable to have it truncated in some way. I think it's the intent is not to be disrespectful to anyone who thinks to come. And I think probably if we've had invites, I think it's probably right, as Pat says, that if we at least see if they're very insistent on coming, and therefore honour what we had said. I do think though all have to be cognizant of we're not. And I'm not being disrespectful to anyone, but we're not here for, as a public affairs operation, for people to promote what they're working on, the good work that they do, because that can be understood and promoted in other ways, and it's not disrespectful to people's work to say that. I think it's just a reflection of the burden that this committee has in terms of a huge workload and a huge amount, and anyone working in the education sector in any way will understand that there are massive priorities in education that we have to try and get to. So I think it's probably one for maybe a proposal to be put together, and us from a party perspective to think about and come back and maybe make a decision on that basis, and that allows time also for the conversations to be had with those who are maybe scheduled currently.
Do you want to come in?
That's great. Thank you very much, Chair. I agree with Pat, and certainly agree with David as well. Otherwise, I'll be kicked out of the party. What I keep hearing is that, and we saw it today, we had a faith-based organisation and a non-faith-based organisation. We had NSPCC and TRC. And as we question the witnesses, there is a commonality that is coming out, and I've been here 3 weeks, across the board, that we can't all agree with. We start talking about things like consent, or we start talking about pornography, or algorithms online, or violence against women and girls, or safeguarding, and all those sort of areas which are crucial, that need to be taught in schools. And the committee agrees on that. Now, once you push past that, we will have a range of views, and we all know what those views are, and we all have those views, and we're all entitled to those views on this committee. But what I would like to see happen in this committee is a level of consensus so we can actually say, here are, and I asked the NSPCC about this today, what is the key thing that you're interested in terms of this RSA inquiry? They said safeguarding. I agree with them. I think that is absolutely core. It's probably the most important thing in terms of an RSA inquiry. But there are other things that we can put into that. I'm sure other committee members will want that. But I just think that this going on week after week, as Pat said, we will probably have a good idea about what these people are going to come and say. It's interesting to hear their work, and I think the NSPCC in particular was outstanding today. I wouldn't agree with absolutely everything in terms of their statement, but the work they do is amazing. But I just sort of think there are other things I think would be better for this committee to look towards, and that's not to minimise this RSA inquiry, but I would like to see if this committee could get to a place where we can put ticks beside 5 boxes and go, this is the stuff that we think is really pivotal that has to be in RSE, and then move on to other stuff. And I think we can get there. I think if the committee wants to push past that, I think that's where the problems start, because we'll have a range of views on that. But I think there's consensus on a whole series of these key things. And I happen to think that, and NSPCC gave us a good example, I happen to believe that everyone in this committee, if I ask the question, what is the core element that we should have in RSE, I hope everyone would say safeguarding. Mm-hmm. And we've agreed on something, and it's how far we can build consensus along a series of steps in that area. That's my thoughts, Chair.
No, thank you for that, Peter. There's a couple of things. I think I am very conscious of time and possibly rushing to a decision at this point at the end of a session may not be the best approach. I think we should bear in mind that there is a live consultation out, so we are going to be receiving responses from people on this anyway, and I think those from teachers, parents, and young people, that will undoubtedly inform any final report as well. I am also just conscious that as a committee we did agree to run the mini inquiry, and that creates a set of expectations around stakeholders who are interested in the issue, that they will be afforded the opportunity to feed into it. So I do think there is a balance to be struck. So I think this is possibly one that we would need to take away to revisit with a decision next week, and our agenda next week is much lighter, so I think there will be perhaps opportunity to do that. So I will link in with Deputy Chair and the committee clerk, and we will see perhaps what the best framework to discuss this and come to a decision next week would be. I would just want to put on record, while I understand the huge numbers of pressures in the system in education that we would want to be covering, that we also don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and produce something that doesn't actually produce a comprehensive report on the issues and has ensured that we've heard evidence widely. So I think there's a balance to be struck. And initially, when we raised the inquiry, I think the appetite was to hear widely. So we've gone wide and now are maybe going to narrow. So we'll need to find a balance there. So look, I'm happy that we maybe all link in together, and committee members obviously feel free to reach out to me directly and through the committee clerk as well, and we can pick this up next week.
I think there is an evidence-taking stage of any inquiry, be it a normal-sized inquiry or a mini inquiry. With the mini inquiry, there's a bit more flexibility. You can make recommendations and conclusions, but also just reference that there are themes that need to be worked upon further, that have come up again and again in consideration. So there's consensus, and then there's tolerance, and there's just different ways of reporting on your work as well.
Can I say, just from my perspective, I understand that there was that way, and a lot of it was to do with if we felt there was a lot of people coming in, to make sure that there's also balance in some of the arguments and discussions that would be had. But if you're truncating that equally, it can remain balanced, but just in a shorter way. But I understand how we've got to where we've got to. I don't think it's a criticism necessarily of anyone in particular, just that I think time on committee would be should be focused more at times on some of those bigger issues that are prominent as well.
Okay, well, to be picked up next week, we'll table that as an item. If we can just have that table as an item for discussion and decision, we can all link in over the course of the week on that basis. So that is forward work planning. At this stage, are we happy to endorse the draft and note draft forward work plan at this stage? We agreed. Item 11, any other business? No. Item 12, date, time and place of next meeting. So that is scheduled for Wednesday the 16th of October, 2 p.m, room 29, Parliament Buildings. Leaves me to put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn. We agreed?
Agreed.
Committee room 29, sound. Committee room 29, sound.